Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Restarted the Hero Era. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. At first, Midoriya Izuku thought he was dreaming. What else would one think if they had opened their eyes to their childhood bedroom? Izuku blinked and slowly rose from his position in bed. Strangely enough, the bed did not feel too small. In fact, it felt bigger than it should have. Going along with the dream, he made to stand, only to come short and fall face first into his carpet. Izuku groaned softly at the pain in his nose and ankle. Sniffling, the green-haired hero stood up and looked around. It was definitely his childhood bedroom, strikingly bare compared to his apartment full of hero merch, most being his former classmates. He only had 2 posters of All Might and a couple other small items of other heroes. Although his favorite was the 13-styled snow globe, which had stars instead of snow and even glowed at night. However, once his eyes settled on the Endeavor poster, he felt rage. His mother had put it up because she thought it would keep him satisfied so he wouldn't bother her. He took his tiny body and strode over, stumbling a few times due to his suddenly short legs. Izuku found out just how short he was from the fact that he couldn't reach the poster. The 23-year-old turnchild huffed and looked around. There was a desk in the room, but it had a wobbly rolling chair. Not exactly stable ground to boost himself on. So the boy quickly ran to the dining room and grabbed a chair from the table. With it beneath the poster of flaming garbage known as the number 2 hero, currently, it was easy to take down. But Izuku wasn't done yet. He ripped it to as many shreds as he possibly could, which was loud and messy. In the middle of his tearing, his mother came in, and the look on her face was not good news. So, it was not a dream. Izuku thought as he felt around underneath his bed for the medkit. His arms were covered in bruises and a multitude of scratches, taking the brunt of the damage, but even his torso wasn't safe. His face scrunched up in pain as he disinfected his wounds. Izuku had no clue what was going on and how he was here. If it wasn't a dream, it would have been a silly prank. But a prank doesn't go this far. Considering his surroundings, his mother's attitude and looks, plus his own stature, the only other possibility is time travel. Izuku sniffled, finally finished with dressing his wounds, and shakily stood up. He had to think. Judging by the calendar, he was 6, meaning the green-eyed boy was quirkless once more. Kaken still hated his guts. He hadn't met All Might, or his classmates, or his teachers. He was alone again, with no one to hold up an umbrella to shield him from the massive, powerful waterfall crashing down on him. The former, future, hero wiped his eyes and shook his head. He just has to bear it for another 10 years. Izuku could do that, couldn't he? Or he could leave. The boy knew his mother wouldn't file a missing report on him. She only cared for him once he gained a quirk. Even then she only put up a facade in front of everyone. That included him. He could see the hatred in her eyes, burning behind her blinding smile that just didn't reach her eyes. The quirkless 6-year-old burrowed himself in a castle of blankets, which was a bit pathetic considering how little he had. He had a multitude of notebooks and a pen in front of him, the only things his mother bought him without him asking. Probably because it kept him occupied so he wouldn't be bothering her. With a sigh, the green-clad child set out with taking notes. Notes of the past, future? It was written in the same code he had started using since his 2nd year at UA, in case anyone with unsavory goals in mind would attempt to use his notes. Although he was genuinely confused on whether or not it was the past or the future. After a moment or so of deep thought, Izuku crossed out the words and wrote, Notes of the Alternate World Volume 1. The reason he put down Volume 1 was due to the fact that he may need to write more in the future. Maybe he would remember something new or need to revise. It was also a possibility that this could happen again. Not like he had a clue how or why it happened to begin with. If he could figure out, he could either prevent it from happening again or even go back in case of failure. However, Izuku couldn't risk the idea of failing, so there was no experimenting. His notes started from the current point he was at, age 6, and went on as far as he possibly could within the amount of time he had. Most of the notes consisted of what happened throughout his years at UA and directly after. There was the League of Villains, the sports festival, internships that involved the hero killer, training camp, Kamino Ward, Shai Hisaiki raid, and so on. That was only half of what went down in his first year of high school. Plus the smaller, less important events. Izuku was knocked out of his thoughts when his alarm clock started, causing the green-haired boy to stare at it in confusion after turning it off. Why would he be getting up so early in the morning? Shrugging it off, he resumed his mumbling and continued taking his notes. Only for it to hit him almost an hour later. Sheet. He slapped a hand over his mouth, hoping it didn't wake his mother. After a few tense moments of waiting, he let out a breath and sagged in relief. The hero from the future slowly slid off the bed, keeping his steps silent. It was easier than expected, as not only was it a habit of his younger self but also from his experience of being a pro hero. Being smaller still made it slightly difficult to get around without stumbling, as he was used to longer legs and a taller vantage point. But experience definitely outweighed it. Clad in his elementary school uniform, Izuku grabbed his notebooks and stuffed them in the perfect hiding place. In his closet, where there was a small door hidden behind the abundance of stuffed animals he had from before he was diagnosed as quirkless. At least his parents loved him then, although not truly if they were willing to take it away so easily. With his signature yellow backpack, the boy ran off to school. He paused halfway down the road, thinking for a second about where to go as he hadn't been there in years. Wait, I have no clue where my class or seat is. The green-haired child panicked. His memory wasn't that good. Izuku looked around with his panic well hidden. If I can find Kaken, I can follow him to the classroom. Maybe then I can remember where my seat is. With how loud the blonde was, it wasn't hard to find him. So, Izuku followed his friend. Subtly, of course, he didn't feel like gaining any new injuries, specifically burns. They were a pain to deal with. Izuku found his classroom, courtesy of Kaken, and looked around to find his seat. Why are you just standing there, you dim nerd? Alright. Kaken always had a strong vocabulary, but it only got worse as they got older. I can't remember where my seat was. Was his voice always this quiet? Kaken immediately knew something was wrong, judging by the way his brows furrowed. What hit you on the head? It's right there, Deku. The blonde pointed at a seat a few paces away. The boy from the future chuckled nervously. Oh. He quickly sat down, not wanting to be the center of attention. Izuku was used to it, but it still made him a bit nervous considering he couldn't exactly protect himself anymore. After all, he was quirkless again. Time to go through first grade again. It was boring the first time around, now he had to repeat it. There were several plans running through Izuku's mind as he ran home. One of them involved running away and getting help, which wasn't the best. Not many people cared for the quirkless. Although he knew a couple of heroes that did. His teachers and classmates being most of them. Aizawa-sensei would be the perfect candidate due to his own quirk. He didn't look down on those like others in this messed-up society do. How did he know? Well, shortly after the end of his first year at UA, the underground pro had found out the truth about everything. From being diagnosed as quirkless to that very moment. Long story short, Aizawa-sensei had chewed out Kaken like a rabid dog with rabies. Izuku has never seen the living dynamite that terrified, not even when Kirishima almost died. He shook the thoughts out of his head and silently padded through the apartment, even though he knew his mother was at work. A habit of his younger self. The first stop was his bedroom, dropping off his book bag and changing into comfortable clothes. Next, he ran to the kitchen. He had no quirk to defend himself with, so he needed something, even if he had no clue how to properly use it. He grabbed one of the large knives with a sheath and scampered back to his room. Izuku dumped out his backpack full of school materials and folded a blanket as small as he possibly could to shove at the very bottom. A few change of clothes were next, along with his med kit and the notebooks he had filled earlier in the morning. His emerald eyes had fleeted towards his old ones for a split second, causing him to pause. Considering how large his bag was, Izuku definitely had enough room for his old ones. There weren't many considering he had only started writing them almost 2 years ago. They weren't very well written. But they were the beginning of who he was, a nostalgic symbol he had kept with him through all his years. Number 13 was the most important to him though, despite how messed up it was. His eyes watered. Would things be different this time around? Izuku wanted the overall outcome to be different, but he didn't want to change the actual experience. Like the USJ, fighting together against the League had brought the class together, but he didn't want Aizawa-sensei to get hurt. It's the same with Stain. With a pained sigh, the time traveler shoved them in the yellow bag. Izuku harshly pulled at his cheeks, reminiscent of a grandma who was on the verge of death by cuteness. It helped him snap out of his thoughts. Even if it was a bit of a weird thing to do when most would simply slap themselves. The boy just had too much force sometimes. Izuku had been that person, not often, until he got one for all and bulked up. He remembered it very clearly. Being the nervous guy he was, he would not stop fidgeting when it came to the day before graduation, so he had to snap himself out of it. He may or may not have ended up on the floor with a bloody nose. Then Kaken was attempting to hype him up by getting him to have a screaming contest. It surprisingly worked. Until he started crying after it was over. Chuckling at the memory playing in his head, Izuku smiled. Yeah, he couldn't change those moments. So, the green gremlin quickly stuffed in the few hero merch items he did like. For example, the 13 snow globe, star globe, and an All Might action figure. Things were going to be better this time. No matter what it took. And he can't do that with his mother around. He was willing to risk anything, especially when it comes to Shudo. Lastly, Izuku packed some non-perishable food and slid the knife in the side of his bag. It was too large to fit into his pockets and he didn't have a hoodie, only a jacket. It wasn't like he was going to be out long, but if he was going to find his teacher, it might take a while. After all, Aizawa-sensei was an underground hero who was stealthier than the man. Izuku was, surprisingly, but also not. He slid the backpack over his shoulders and went to open the door when a thought came to mind. The green-clad boy paused. His mother wouldn't notice him gone, she always ignored him, as if he had never existed in the first place. Even if he were standing in front of her. The only attention she gave him was when he either bothered her, or she was drunk. Being in his child body, not too far off from when she truly loved him, the memories of her love was still fresh. It stung. Backing away from the door, Izuku slowly approached the desk to his right. He ruffled through the drawers, finding a blank notebook from the pile. He opened it to the first page and grabbed the first writing utensil he saw, a pen. His writing was sprawled across the blank page in mere seconds, not bothering to obey the lines as he struggled to keep in his feelings. Something within him still loved his mother despite everything she had done to him. With a shaky breath, he stumbled away as soon as it was done. Izuku turned around and darted for the window, opening it swiftly as he attempted to breathe properly. Wind kissed his face and ruffled the curtains, whispering reassurances in his ears. He closed his eyes and placed a hand on top of his other, phantom signals of comfort flowing through his veins. A couple moments later, a feral grin spread across his face as his eyelids lifted. He stood back as far as he could go, lowering his stance. Then he ran. The window came closer every second. Without pause, Izuku bounded off the windowsill and flew through the air. He managed to get a hold of the edge on the apartment building across from him. His feet slid, but he pulled himself up and stood on the sill. It wasn't very wide, but enough for his small body. He jumped up to the one above him and lifted his body. Then to another. And another. Another. His arms were aching by the time he reached the top, his face flushed from the foreign exercise and tears in his eyes from the wind. Izuku had peered over the roof of the building just in time to catch the sun setting in the distance. Green eyes were soon filled with stars as they softened and the grin finally fell. The 6-year-old wasn't bothered by the pain in his limbs as he dangled from the edge. Worth it, Izuku whispered, finally hauling himself all the way onto the roof. In only a couple seconds, the sun was gone. The past was stuck behind him, and he wasn't going to turn back around. Plus, a small boy with green hair and eyes to match followed his blonde friend with a smile on his face. Joyful chants of "Kaken" spilling from his mouth. Kaken marched on like a general leading his army of soldiers to war, a smile just as wide on his face. Then Kaken fell, and when the boy tried to help, Kaken ran. The blonde ran and ran as far as he could. He followed, even though it hurt and he found it hard to breathe, he followed. He had to make sure his friend was okay. Kaken disappeared as he came to the edge of a massive cliff and the boy slipped in his pursuit. He burst through a sky of dark clouds. It was raining on the other side. The boy screamed as he fell, landing in a sea of darkness. Voices screamed at him as he clawed his way to the surface. When he broke free, the world was falling down on him. Harsh, loud and heavy as it attacked him. Like a waterfall. The boy stood on the drowned street, devoid of life. He cried in anguish, screaming as he wrapped his arms around himself. Screamed for someone to help him, anyone. Please save me. But his efforts were useless, just like himself. A decade plus. Izuku is very smart, even when he was originally 6 the first time around. However, his intelligence was overshadowed by harsh words, a shy demeanor, and a childish way behavior. Now, he had the same mind as his 23-year-old self. So, he made sure he had a plan when he ran away. No, the plan was not a vague idea like many other children would come up with. Izuku knew what courses of action were best in his situation to get exactly what he wanted. That night, Izuku decided to stay on the rooftops. He would be safe from the crime below him, doubting a criminal would decide to scale a several-floor building. After resting his legs for a few minutes, Izuku took a running start and bounded towards the building across from him. Another apartment building. It was much easier considering he was already on the roof and didn't need to drag his scrawny body up. He didn't think he would make it if he had to. Eventually, he reached the edge of the complex and simply collapsed onto his back, panting. Jumping from roof to roof was especially tiring in his untrained body. 1,000 thoughts came to mind as to what to say if someone caught him up here. I wanted to sleep underneath the stairs. Mommy said it was okay as long as I don't go near the edge. My bag? Oh, it has my blankets for when it gets cold. I didn't want them to blow away. That was what he decided to use. He was glad he was so good at lying. The next morning was when he decided to actually scout for a place to stay for a while. Izuku didn't trust his memory to come up with an abandoned building he could possibly sleep in for the time being from 17 years ago. So, taking the role of a homeschooled child searching for a topic to use for his project, Izuku set the first stage of his plan in motion. "Excuse me, miss?" The boy asked an old lady carrying a single bag of groceries. She turned to him with a kind smile. "Oh my! Shouldn't you be in school, young man?" Her tone was mischievous as she raised an eyebrow. Izuku shook his head. "I'm homeschooled." He gave her a beaming smile. If Izuku weren't looking at her face, he would have missed the way the corner of her lips moved downwards and the spark in her eyes. "Well, how can I help such a nice child like you?" The old woman chuckled. With a frustrated sigh, Izuku spoke up. "Well, I have to do a project on something that affects the .ecom.oni." He made sure to stumble on the word, and I thought abandoned building were really cool. But they're also bad because they could be used for other things instead of just sitting there. So I was really wondering if you knew any abandoned buildings around? I do have to have examples, but I could find some online, but I thought it'd be best to also get the opinions of other people. Like, maybe they have a con. His rant was cut off by the lady's bellowing. Izuku didn't even need to force his face to flush. There were plenty of habits he had never gotten rid of even after becoming a pro. Rambling was just one of them. "Ah, you're so passionate. Such a good thing to see in the younger generation these days," she stated with a wave of her hand, unconcerned with his ramblings. After a moment of laughter, the woman looked deep in thought. "Well, I don't know much about abandoned buildings. I never paid attention to them. However, I do know one particular one. If you're looking for something interesting, the one I have in mind has quite the past behind it. You could tell me the name and I can search it up somewhere. If it has a story, then it must be well known. So it can't be that hard to find." The gray-haired lady shook her head. No, it's not very well known. How about we go to the nearby park and talk about it there? There's no way I can leave a child like you out here by yourself." Izuku fidgeted in place, uncomfortable with the thought of being alone with a stranger. He couldn't defend himself in the way he could, in the future. "Well, This was an old lady standing in front of him. How bad could she hurt him? Plus, it was a park, plenty of people would be around in case something were to happen. Hesitantly, he nodded. It would be best to go along with it. After all, he had nowhere else to go, and being around someone would be safer than going to whatever abandoned place he would later arrive at. In that case, you can call me Rugi Motager. What should I call you? Rugi gave him a look, shifting the plastic bag to her other hand as she guided him down the crowded street. Midoriya Izuku. Rugi smiled. It looked oddly familiar. Nice to meet you, Izuku. She greeted as they found a bench to sit at. The old woman placed her bag on the free space next to her while Izuku took the other backpack at his feet. So, to start off, she hummed, "What kind of place are you looking for?" Izuku blinked, about to respond when he remembered his character. "A really cool one. You said you had a story about someplace abandoned." He gushed, kicking his feet to make himself seem excited. "Well, it isn't very safe to be around those type of buildings. You don't plan on going there, do you?" He furiously shook his head. "Not in them, maybe just some pictures though. I have to prove it exists, right?" Rugi didn't seem to believe him, shaking her head. She was silent for several moments, as if she expected him to say something. When he didn't, she did. "Do you need somewhere to go?" The words were sudden, causing the time traveler to choke on air in surprise. What?" he gasped. She pursed her lips. "I'm a grandmother." Rugi chuckled lightly, but then her expression hardened. Her pale green eyes stared at him with a pleading gaze. "Your eyes look as if you've seen the worst of things, even if you are a child." Izuku's face paled and his eyes suddenly stung a bit. Only those who were close to him knew how to read the boy easily. Even then, there were moments where he could school his expression so well, no one had the slightest clue as to whether or not he was lying. So, Izuku gulped and averted his eyes as to being found out. Rugi sighed softly and placed a wrinkled hand on the fluffy nest he called hair. "Would you like to talk about it?" Izuku thought for a moment before looking around. There were a lot of people. Then he shook his head. "Not here." Plus, Deku wept underneath the veil of rain, tears mixing with the water. Eventually, he had run dry, unlike the gloomy world around him. So, he sat on his knees, with his arms wrapped around himself as tight as they would go. He stared at his distorted reflection in the puddle below him, which was momentarily saved from the onslaught of rain with his body hovering over it. Deku's reflection had no color, but he didn't react. It felt like he was there forever until a hand landed on his shoulder. He barely moved, only gazing at the wrinkled fingers in his vision. Then he looked away and back at his reflection. It didn't show the old lady standing behind him, and it definitely didn't show her turning and fleeing. Plus, Izuku was reluctant to follow the old lady. Stranger danger people. Being a hero meant he knew more about that than others did. However, Rugi had easily figured him out and seemed very kind. His instincts were never wrong, and he felt safe next to her. Just a little nervous that she would alert the authorities. After all, Izuku had no clue how many chances he had at changing the future. There was no way he could just F it all up because some old woman caught him at a moment he couldn't fight back. So, he entered Rugi's apartment with ease. As much ease as a fresh, 6-year-old runaway could have anyway. He sat in the armchair next to her couch, 2 teacups on the coffee table as she hustled around. However, Izuku didn't touch it. Who knew what she could have to put in it? So it sat in the same spot, steam rising as Rugi sipped hers. "May I ask why you were out and about all alone?" Her pale green eyes slowly shifted towards him. The green-haired time traveler shifted. "It's not something I can share." Would telling her change things too much? She was an absolute stranger, not someone he knew he could trust because he knew them in the future, past. Can't, shouldn't, or won't? He was silent for a moment, fiddling with his left hand and resisting the urge to peel off the bandages. If Rugi noticed, she said nothing about it as she let him think. "Shouldn't," Izuku eventually stated, looking back up at her. If she continued to pry, he could leave. Even with his malnourished, untrained body, he was sure he could get away. Of course, it's not good to underestimate your opponent. As long as you're not in any danger. Rugi stood up, leaving his teacup on the table as she went to wash hers. You should ask for help if you are. Izuku's shoulders sagged, memories rushing through his head. No one was in any danger right now, but that didn't mean there wouldn't be at some point. He pressed his lips into a thin line, his eyes narrowing in thought. Does it count if the danger happens in the future? Even if that future is in several years? A lot of people would get hurt, some would even die or never be able to be heroes again. He knew next to nothing about what was happening right now. Was Aizawa-sensei a teacher right now? Is Shigaraki a villain yet? Could he really change things for the better? What if he made them worse? Would meeting his friends earlier cause them to think different of him? If so, what would happen then? What about Shudo? Could he save him sooner? He shook his head, pulling at his own cheeks. Satisfied with breaking out of his own thoughts, Izuku took a deep breath. Right now was not the time to spiral. Definitely not in front of Rugi. Once he left and found a place to stay. A place to stay. Izuku gasped, turning in his seat towards the kitchen. What about the abandoned building you were talking about? He asked the gray-haired woman as she hustled towards him to take his untouched teacup. Rugi hummed, "What about it, dearie? You were going to tell me about it, and now you got me sidetracked." He took a horrified breath. Was this the plan all along? To take me to your house so you can kill me? She was silent for a moment before suddenly laughing. Okay, he may have exaggerated a bit. Oh, goodness gracious no. Rugi held a hand to her chest, breathing heavily from her burst of laughter. I may old and forgetful, but I am far from naive. Then she grinned, a very familiar grin. Why was it so familiar? Third and fourth door to the right, towels are under the sink. Before Izuku could get a single word in, she left him to his own thoughts. He blinked, mentally going through the memories of what happened within the past hour. Had he just been kidnapped by an old lady? Hesitantly, Izuku stood up and grabbed his bag from next to the chair. He looked towards the hallway and slowly made his way down. Would there be a trap when he opened the door? Moving towards the door on the very end, Izuku swung it open with the caution of a seasoned pro. It was just a bedroom. A plain one, suited for the needs of a guest. A bed, table, and dresser. He hummed, was she letting him stay the night? Rugi must be very kind and trustful, or maybe she just didn't want the guilty conscience of letting him go. After all, you never know what'll happen on the streets. Especially to a 6-year-old without a quirk or any kind of training. He let his yellow backpack drop to the ground, furrowing his eyebrows. If the last door was a bedroom, then the other must be a bathroom. Taking a deep breath, Izuku left his belongings and moved towards the one to his left. Izuku took a quick shower, after checking the room for anything like cameras of course, so what if he was a bit paranoid? There was no way Rugi was this kind, especially if she were to know of his quirkless status. Once he changed and rewrapped his left hand, he cracked open the door just wide enough to peek out. Rugi was setting dishes on the table. Hopefully it was safe to eat, even if he weren't hungry. Izuku knew his current form was malnourished and definitely needed the nutrients. He knew all too well how to deal with types of situations he was in. That's also how he knew not many heroes would help people like him. There was a reason Izuku was specifically looking for Aizawa or any of the other teachers. At least then he knew he was getting help and wouldn't go back to his mother. You can just leave your dirty clothes in the hamper. Rugi spoke up, looking at him with a very subtle smile. I made you something to eat, it's not hard to notice how skinny you are. He glanced at the food on the table, then at her. Lightly dropping his clothes in the dirty laundry hamper behind him without looking away. What is it? Izuku asked, his voice quiet and laced with suspicion. Her kindness was starting to seem like a bit too much. Just some soup and rice. It'll be easy to keep down and I didn't make a lot, I doubt you'd be able to eat much anyway. Izuku sat down after a few moments of studying her, coming to the conclusion that she had no ill intent. Why are you helping me? I want an actual answer. Rugi was silent for a moment, sitting down in the chair furthest of him. You remind me of my grandson. Her words were almost inaudible, even the look in your eyes is like his. As if you're tired of the world and have seen things no human being should ever see. The only difference is that he is now an adult and the sight makes sense. But not for a child like you. Is he a hero? She hummed and nodded before chuckled. Not one you would know of. Taking a deep breath, her posture straightened and the tone suddenly changed. So what were you going to tell me? It must be pretty important if you wouldn't tell in public, even if no one was close enough to hear. He thought deeply for a moment. Should he tell her everything? Rugi could be deemed trustworthy at this point, and she seemed familiar. Maybe he had met her for a split second in the other run and just didn't remember? With his mind made up, he placed down his spoon. It's a lot, and very confusing, even unbelievable. Have you seen our world? With all these unique quirks and soulmates, anything is possible at this point. She huffed playfully. Well, what if I said things happened? Rugi raised an eyebrow. Things? Things. He confirmed, bad things. She frowned at the thought. I'm trying to find someone. He has connections I can use to get the help needed for not only others but also me. Who is this someone? She propped her arms on the table, intertwining her fingers. He's an underground pro. I know him personally, but he has no clue of who I am. His name is Eraserhead. Rugi's eyes lit up. He can temporarily erase someone's ability to use their quirk. Looking at them, Izuku explained, trying his best not to give away too much. The graying old lady pursed her lips. He is difficult to find. She had a knowing look. What you are implying is hard to believe. I know how to get to him. His bold claim caused the woman to laugh, the tension in the room lessening. What is the plan and how can I help? Izuku smiled dangerously, leaning forward in anticipation. Eraserhead is a softy on the inside, no matter how much he tries to deny it. I'll let my disappearance sink in for a while. So when a discriminated, abused, runaway child is right in front of him, that'll surely get his attention. Even more so when he realizes what'll happen if he lets them go into the system and if that isn't enough. A 6-year-old knowing classified information will. Midoriya Izuku used to be a kind and loving woman. She had yearned for a family, whether it be small or large, ever since she was younger. So when she had Izuku, her world brightened. He was so tiny and green just like her, but also had his father's curly hair and freckles. The Midoriyas have always been criers, so of course she cried out of pure joy when he was born. To think she had the chance of being a mother was an amazing thing. She wanted to give him all the love she could possibly give, and Izuku knew Hisashi did as well. They lived the first couple years happily. Izuku was a happy child with all the love he was given. Even Hisashi cared for the boy in their image, but she could tell there was something going on in his head. Something that wasn't good. She tried her best to keep Izuku away from him when he wasn't in a good mood. Izuku couldn't save herself in those situations, but she could shield Izuku from his harsh words and hands whenever the time came. However, that changed around the time Izuku was diagnosed quirkless. Hisashi was angry. No one liked it when he was angry. Fire spewed from his mouth just as ferociously as his words, dangerous. Uncomfortable heat blistering their skin. Izuku was pushed back with no ounce of care for her being, but she didn't care that her ankle was probably twisted from her stumble. All she could care for was Izuku. She turned her head to her baby, the 4-year-old crying in fear. Izuku pulled herself to her feet. Hisashi! She called out to him, leave him alone. He's... The woman gasped when she was held back. Her pleads were met with nothing but flames. Those flames used to be so beautiful to her when they had fallen in love. Now, they were burning everything she knew to ashes. It didn't matter how much Izuku begged, her screams of horror matched her son's. Her voice was hoarse long before Hisashi left with a slamming door. Causing the walls to shake, items shifted and a photo shattered when embraced by the ground. However, she paid it no mind. Izuku, baby please. Izuku lightly nudged him as to not bother the injuries. Izuku. Izuku's eyes slowly cracked open, hazy and unfocused. His gaze moved to her but he didn't react even though she sagged in relief. Whispering reassurances, repressing the need to run her fingers through his hair. Even as she ran around the apartment like a chicken without a head, gathering the med kit and other comforting items, he had no reaction. Izuku simply sat and blinked every few seconds. Was he even breathing? When she bandaged his head, Inko couldn't help but stare into his eyes. He looked right through her as if she were invisible. It hurt. It hurt so much to see that look in her son's eyes. Although, in that moment she stepped away and urged him to give some kind of response. Inko noticed. His fluffy, curly hair was covered in soot and Izuku's eyes still seemed to reflect the orange flames. He had never looked more like his father than in that very moment. It scared her. So, she slowly left the room with a painful feeling in her chest. With the door to her bedroom closed, her sobbing drowned out the whispered, "Mama," from the couch. From then on, all she saw was the man that would forever haunt her, and the mark on the back of his hand made her jealous of the love he would find someday. So Inko made him cover it up so she wouldn't see it when he was around. Which wasn't often. But there were times when she came home and he was there, sitting at the coffee table, engrossed in his school work or hero analysis. So engrossed that he didn't notice her come in. Before Inko could reprimand him, his mumbling caught her ear and she froze. Instead, she walked away and listened from around the corner. Sometimes, she would even fall asleep with her knees on the ground and head against the wall. But today, Inko did not want to deal with his mumbling. She had gotten a call from the school while at work. The brat had been skipping school for almost a week. Izuku really was turning out just like Hisashi, a rebel who gave little to no care about a single thing or being but himself. Him going to school was the reason she was able to stay so sane on the days she was home during the day. Playing hooky was not an option. With her anger boiling to the top, Inko shut the front door loudly. The boy was not in the living room, so she barreled straight for his bedroom. His door squeaked and protested as it was flung from his henges. "YD?" Inko paused, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. A soft breeze caused her to look over. The window was wide open, curtains flailing around. Inko rushed towards the window, possibilities filling her brain. First, she looked down and scanned the concrete of the alley below. Okay, he wasn't a splat on the concrete. Then she noticed the shoe marks on the windowsill. Backing away, Inko hoped it was a sick joke and started looking around the room for traces of the green-haired boy that lived in this room. In the closet? Under the bed? Then she hit the corner of the desk. She stared at the notebook chilling on the center of the desk. Inko sniffled, not even realizing she was crying. So he lifted up the book. It had no title and was brand new. After a moment of staring, the woman opened it to the first page. Immediately, Inko clutched it to her chest and cried. And for the first time in 2 years, the kind, loving woman broke free from the shell of trauma. "I still love you." After Izuku had adjusted to his body suddenly being smaller, it was relatively easy to pull certain moves. However, his short and tiny malnourished body wasn't as flexible, neither did it have its previous stamina or strength. Although, that was a given. Everything else he could do was simply muscle memory. All he has to do is adjust certain moves for his current body and build stamina. However, what better way to do so than on the field itself? Of course, he's not in the body of a pro hero anymore. So he may or may not need to take the role of a vigilante. Izuku might as well use his training time to gather more information. He may be from the future, but his mind could only hold so much at once. So, Izuku planned his moves in advance. With the help of Rugi, surprisingly enough, she had somehow managed to get a copy of Aizawa-sensei's usual patrol route. It made several questions pop up in his head. He knew her grandson was an underground pro. Did he trust Rugi so much that he'd be willing to give private information about another coworker that she wouldn't need? Shaking off his suspicions, Izuku pulled the window open. He had planned his own route so he would intersect with his teacher. It would surely help in the long run. Unfortunately, there was no way for him to do what he did when he left home. So he had to go up the fire exit and made extra sure to keep his steps soft and slow. It would take some time for his habits to come back. His outfit right now was very simple and nondescript. He could easily pass off as a passerby, as long as they haven't seen him doing illegal things with the outfit on. Izuku jumped across the rooftops, keeping his pace slow. The time traveler needed to build up stamina, not push it. Every time he landed, the green boy winced at how loud he was. Being silent was a habit so ingrained into his system, now he had to regain that. He had started to pick up being quiet around this age the first time, but it wasn't a habit by the time he came back. If only it was, that'd be one less thing to worry about. Sighing, Izuku fixed his surgical mask and jumped down with the best grace he could manage. He stealed a glare at the man deeper in the alley. "Oi, fucker! Step away from him." It was a heavy demand, as he thought about what Kaken would say. Just tone down. T'd be best to keep his real identity as far away from his as he could. He has to be a hero after all. The new vigilante watched as the criminal tossed the bag back. A simple mugging. "Oh, and what is a pipsqueak like you going to do?" He chuckled, stomping closer. Izuku waited for the first hit, after that it would be self-defense. And if he never used a quirk, there can't be any charges against him. If anything, he'd get in trouble for being out this late. The blonde swung at him with a lazy fist, so Izuku, now in his element, leapt to the side. Figuring what his new persona would do, the boy crouched under another punch and made a jab at his side while popping back up. He scrambled on top of a dumpster before the man could follow him. When the criminal bounded towards him, he was kicked in the face. Blood dripped from his nose as he fell backwards. Before he could do anything, Izuku jumped down and bound his ankles with zip ties. He kicked his feet and thrashed as the action was repeated with his wrists. The curses and threats flowing from his mouth didn't deter the vigilante. He'd heard and even came up with worse. Turning towards the man against the wall, "You all right?" He tried to be casual, definitely not excited that he managed to take down a grown man despite being in the body of a 6-year-old. The victim nodded. I've already called the police. They should be here soon." His wide eyes scanned Izuku, likely taking in how small he was. Sheet. He searched for the easiest way up. Wasn't hard considering there were fire escapes everywhere. It didn't take long to get on the roof, but as soon as he crossed to the next one, he caught sight of a silhouette. If Izuku didn't know his teacher, he would have been caught in the gray material. "It's already dealt with, old man," he said, rushing to the next roof. However, once he was in midair, he had no way to dodge. With a yelp, he was pulled back to Eraserhead. "Beach. You could have just asked me to stay." It felt so strange to freely curse like this, but if it kept his identity secret, so be it. "You've got quite a mouth." The tired pro drawled, raising an eyebrow and lifting him up. Still in the capture weapon. Izuku mustered a glare. A cat will hiss when set off. He saw the glint in Eraserhead's eyes just at the word. It was why he chose the name he did for this persona, and it was fitting. Short too. The vigilante almost whined at the jab before remembering his role. He growled more like a cat than a dog could. Well, to the best of his abilities. If he was going to do this, he was going to go all in. "I get it. I'm a short and scrawny but twerp. It's not my fault I got my mother's genes." Hopefully that would deter his past future teacher from thinking he was a kid. Mineta was shorter than Eri. A few seconds passed, then he was suddenly let go. He hit the ground with an oof. "Well, kid. I'm not a demon kid." Was he cursing too frequently? He really hoped it wasn't obvious that his attitude was fake. Eraserhead sighed. "What's your name?" Underneath his surgical mask, Izuku grinned. "It's Black Cat." "Nice to meet you, Eraserhead." "Just stay out of trouble, Black Cat." Plus, the wind howled harshly, nipping at their skin and pulling their clothes. The two fought against it, ignoring the sound of roaring thunder. When they had gotten close enough, she stopped and pointed. The man in black darted forward. Plus, ever since that night, Black Cat had taken his vigilante job seriously. He saved more and more people every night, gaining more experience as he went along. What used to take minutes getting up to the roof was now seconds. It had only been a week, but he was improving quick as it was only a matter of getting in shape. It felt exhilarating to save people, and even more so to tease Eraserhead. Black Cat knew him well, so he knew exactly where to hit. Did he mention how satisfying it was to see the look on the pro's face when the vigilante mentioned something embarrassing that practically no one knew about? Yeah, Class A got some pretty funny stories from Yamada-sensei. Black Cat stifled his giggles with a fist as he texted the detective and Eraserhead. This was something he had to be sure to stay in character with. Run tough litter. Attached image. No shit Sherlock. He watched as Eraserhead opened his messages, only to swivel around with his quirk active. Luckily, he had moved spots as he sent the image. It was Eraserhead hunched form from a small distance. Boogeyman. You've gone from a headache to a migraine. No shit Sherlock. I guess it's safe to assume this is Black Cat. Run tough litter. 3. No shit Sherlock. What is with our names? Boogeyman. Better question. How did he manage to hack into the system? That's the only place he could possibly find our numbers. Run tough litter. You won't find a trace of me. No shit Sherlock. Guess I have to make sure to update the security. Black Cat shook his head. He never had to hack into the system to get their numbers. The police force has had the same circulation of passcodes for decades. A series of digits and numbers based on the year, month, and season. As a hero, he knew the password without ever having to think about it. Unless he was so sleep-deprived he had no clue what the date was. Didn't happen often. Run tough litter. Trace. Turn to your left, there's a note on the door. Boogeyman. You brat. Run tough litter. Right back at you beach. It was hilarious seeing his genuine reaction to the silly scrawl on a sheet on paper. It said, got you to look. With a smiley face. Run tough litter. Behind you. He watched as Eraserhead followed his instructions to find a large cup of his favorite coffee from his favorite cafe. The pro groaned, but he knew that deep down, Eraserhead appreciated it. No shit Sherlock. What is it? Boogeyman. Good demon coffee. The underground hero kept attempting to follow him all night long. He may be faster than him, but Black Cat was a master of throwing him off. So he decided to lead the pro to him with a clue on the cup of coffee. Eraserhead picked up his coffee with a sigh and turned towards him with an eyebrow raised. The vigilante quickly reined in his laughter, putting on the front he'd created. How'd you know? He asked, stepping onto the roof and sitting on the edge. I'm a cat. I get around. Black Cat smirked behind. His mask, taking a couple steps backwards, before faking annoyance. It's effed up a lot. That seemed to get Eraserhead's attention. Being a cat? Sounds like heaven right now. The last part was mumbled to himself, but Black Cat heard it anyway. He was about to speak when he remembered his persona. Of course, a toned-down Kakin. So he shut his mouth and crossed his arms for a minute. Eraserhead stood to get up with a grunt. Quick, quick. How could he get him to notice his original identity? Black Cat shifted as if he were nervous, calling out. Some people are allergic. He blushed in embarrassment that came out stronger than intended. So I can't get near them. Eraserhead paused, hiding his frown in his capture weapon. Seems like an easy way to keep people from annoying you. He can improvise. Black Cat mumbled, not sure how to go about asking him. At least his act could be believable. There's this demon brat I see around the neighborhood. He's got a pretty shitty mom. I haven't seen him in a while. His voice wavered. The pro a couple feet in front of him hummed and stood straighter. Do you have a name? He nodded. It's Midoriya. Midoriya Izuku. Eraserhead nodded again. I'll keep an eye out for him. His scarf flared, wrapping around a lamppost before he was off. Black Cat stood there for a moment, stunned. It went well, but he was pretty sure he broke character. He wasn't sure how else he could get Eraserhead to find out. After all, he was quirkless, no one cared enough to notice. Even if there was a missing persons report, there wouldn't be an investigation. Black Cat huffed, stuffing his gloved hands into the pocket of his hoodie and went on his own. He had accomplished his mission. Tsukachi, I need you to search someone up. Eraserhead sighed, making his way back home. Luckily the detective didn't waste his time questioning why and simply hummed in response. Midoriya Izuku. Black Cat mentioned that he hasn't been seen around. Judging by the way he addressed his mother, it's not good. The clicks of the keyboard were heard over the phone. He was probably placed on speaker as per usual. There was a pause. You're absolutely correct in that. Turns out Midoriya hasn't attended school in 2 weeks. His mother turned herself in a couple days ago. What did she do to him? Mainly neglect with the occasional physical abuse, most of that being under the influence of alcohol. Abuse nonetheless. In fact, she hadn't noticed he was missing until the school. He left a short note stating that he still loved her. The woman requested that we find Midoriya's father, as he was a part of it. Tsukachi sighed on the other end, shaking his head, not that Eraserhead could see that. It's a case of quirk discrimination in the form of abuse. He furrowed his eyebrows, pausing. That struck him harder than other cases would. Eraserhead had gone through that himself. At home and at school. A villainous quirk? No, he's got two. Toe joints. The underground hero paused at the bottom of the last set of stairs to his apartment. He gripped his phone tighter. The boy had to have had it plenty worse than he did. No doubt about it. People are idiots. He seethed. Tsukachi seemed to agree, going by the huff from the detective. No one's been looking for him, no missing posters or alerts. There has been no effort towards the case, they simply put in the report and called it quits. The man took a moment to calm down. I'll send you the file once I update it. It's unlikely he managed to get far. So, he'd be around your area. Show. Hizashi opened the door. It's going to rain soon. He gave a reassuring smile, noticing his mood in a heartbeat. He hung up the phone and entered the apartment. Shoyuta kicked off his boots, not caring where they landed, and flopped onto the nearest surface. Hizashi snorted, copying his boyfriend and falling onto him. Shoyuta grunted underneath his weight. Zashi, get off me, he grumbled. What about a movie? Preferably Disney. Ooh, I want to watch Finding Dory. Don't you? He rambled in excitement, rolling over, causing the dark-haired man to groan. It's almost 4 in the morning. Hizashi playfully crossed his arms and huffed, acting offended. How dare you insult my need to binge-watch Disney movies at horrid hours? He even kicked his feet for good measure. Plus, it's the weekend and I have tomorrow off. Perfect time, huh? A few seconds passed in silence before a grumbled reply came from the already sleep-deprived man. Okay. The blonde cheered, carefully keeping his quirk at bay. Izuku awoke with a start, gasping for air as his eyes shot open. His limbs immediately curled into themselves before frantically kicking off the blanket on his lower half. Was the blanket always that heavy? The time traveler was drenched in cold, but he could bear having the blanket wrapped around him. He held his left hand to his chest and pressed his forehead to the cold concrete of the abandoned building. Rugi had let him leave after a few days under the excuse that he didn't want to get her in trouble for housing a missing child. So Izuku was all alone for now. It took far too long for him to calm down and stop the tears spilling from his green eyes. Izuku took a deep breath, sitting up with a whimper. He rubbed his left hand, wincing when it made impact but eventually relaxing in relief. Izuku closed his eyes and sighed. The burn was much more recent than before, so the phantom pains were worse. If it weren't for the durability and regeneration of soul marks, it would have been burnt off long ago. Soul marks are imprinted on your skin when the youngest of the connection had been born. Soul marks are impossible to get rid of. If the limb they are on is cut off, it'll show up somewhere else. If there's a scar, like on Izuku's hand, it would show up over it and heal immediately around the mark so it could be seen. The only way it'll disappear is the person dies. The mark will slowly lose its color and fade out of existence, then fizzle into the air like a dying flame. Sniffling, Izuku pulled at the bandages covering his hand. They unraveled like a spiraling disaster, slowing to a stop as he paused. The burn was a lot darker in color than it would be, most of it being on his palm before stretching up his fingers and wrapping around the back. His soul mark sat proudly, perfectly healed skin surrounding it as if it were never injured in the first place. Izuku winced as the phantom pains flared up when he flexed his hand. Why was it hurting just now? The future hero leaned back on his makeshift bed, pulling his knees close and holding his left hand in front of him. I wish you were here. He softly cried out, holding it close to his chest. For the rest of that night, he slept with a hazy nightmare full of monstrous screams. They vaguely sounded like humans, just a faint echo in the background. They all seemed to be mixed with angry shouting, curses and screams. All these sounds eventually molded together until it became nothing but a ring his ear and flashes of light and memories surfacing. Until a deafening crash caused an abrupt silence. He couldn't breathe. His limbs were too heavy to move, and his eyes burned when opened. He wasn't sure how long he was there, but it must have been long enough to hear his own heartbeat stop. Rugi Motejuru wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but she was sharp enough to understand when a situation needed her meddling. Right now was the time for her to meddle. She had been searching for a way to butt her head in without making it obvious. So now that her grandson had stopped by, Rugi could finally set the plan she'd had for weeks in motion. However, Shoyuta had mentioned it first. Someone's been in the guest bedroom. The man yawned as he emerged from said bedroom. How do you know? Rugi raised an eyebrow and pursed her lips. She had allowed Izuku to ultimately stay in an abandoned apartment building, only if he were to keep tabs with her and occasionally come by. The hero sighed and collapsed onto the couch and burrowed himself in the soft blanket resting on it. There's more towels than usual in the hamper and even a set of clothes that I know are not yours or mine. I doubt you clean the guest room often, but it has not a single speck of dust. It's not like you knew I was going to be here today. Of course I never know when you're coming by. You're always so busy, you ought to rest here with me. She playfully stomped her foot to enforce her point. Answer the question, Graham. Rugi huffed. It gets lonely here all by my lonesome self. Of course I'd welcome a sweet child in when they ask questions about an abandoned building. She placed her palm on her cheek and sighed, peeking an eye open to peer at her grandson. Shoyuta sat up fully. An abandoned building? The old woman hummed loudly, nodding. She sat in the armchair next to the couch. Yes, the young boy said. Something about doing research for a project. Why would he need to sleep in the guest bedroom and use the shower? His clothes in the hamper? Rugi immediately knew the look on his face and gave him a smug look. Oh, is my little kitten jealous? She gently poked him. He glared at her, but it had no heat. Shoyuta crossed his arms and frowned. Firstly, I'm not a kid anymore. Second, I'm not jealous. Izuku seems very tired most of the time. The bed is softer than the couch. As for the shower, some cruel child decided it'd be a wonderful idea to shove him into the pond when playing. The idea made her angry that someone would even think about doing that. The black-haired male was silent for several seconds. Idatsuku? His eyes narrowed as he loosened his crossed arms. Shoyuta looked at her. What was his name? Rugi made a confused face but was internally cheering. Midoriya Izuku. Green hair, green eyes, and freckles? She nodded and he groaned. You said he was searching for an abandoned building, right? Yes, I thought there was something fishy about his situation. You're thinking the same, aren't you? She leaned forward worriedly as her grandson pulled out his phone and tapped away on it. Shoyuta nodded, finally seeming to find what he was looking for. He's been missing for 3 weeks. Is this him? He turned his phone towards her, a picture showing the boy she's cared for. Rugi nodded, recognizing him anywhere. So he didn't change his looks or name. He was asking about abandoned buildings, so he is possibly looking for a place to stay. What did you tell him? Aizawa leaned back as he questioned her. I told him about the cluster of abandoned buildings closer to the red light district, specifically a rundown hotel that went bankrupt because people believe it to be haunted. It used to be pretty famous. Shoyuta quickly stood up. Do you have the address? She thought deeply for a moment before shaking her head. Rugi truly didn't know exactly where it was. He cursed and quickly left the apartment with a gruff goodbye. Rugi smirked now that she was alone. Izuku didn't know about that part of her side of the plan. After all, she was a grandmother. She was willing to be his partner in crime as long as he wouldn't get hurt for it. No matter how old he mentally was, there was no way that boy could survive. Shoyuta tapped away on his phone as he stomped down the stairs. His first instinct was to call Hisashi, unless it was confidential or urgent. He always called his boyfriend first. Midoriya's case was neither of those, still time-sensitive, but not enough to bypass letting Hisashi in on the situation. Sho! His call almost went to voicemail. I'm on patrol, is something wrong? The hero looked around, wincing at how many people were nearby. He needed to find somewhere to get to the rooftops without drawing attention to himself. You patrol the red light district on weekends. Do you know of a group of buildings that have been abandoned? Maybe one that looks like a hotel? Hisashi thought for a moment, humming, "Yeah, there's about 3 or 4. I pass them every once in a while. Do you have an address or something?" "I believe it's on Saisho Street, where it intersects with Enman Street. A few buildings down from the 7. Is something happening?" The blonde asked, worried, then added, "I'll pass it soon." Understanding the strange man he loved, Shoyuta sighed, "Give me 10 minutes. Seconds after that, finally traveling across rooftops, he hung up. However, Eraserhead still had his phone in hand and dialed another number. It rang for a few seconds. "Tsukachi, I have a big lead on the Midoriya case," Eraserhead said as soon as he heard the click indicating his call had been picked up. He hadn't wasted any time, bounding across the rooftops despite it being too early for patrol. On the other end, Tsukachi perked up, fully sitting up in his chair and immediately pulling up the files. "What is it?" They were close enough to forego being professional and just opted to go straight into it. "Apparently the kid's been hanging around my grandma. He's been asking about abandoned places for a supposed school project." She pointed a couple out. "Then he is most likely in one of those buildings. Judging by his grades, Midoriya's intelligent, he may be moving around." He pointed out, ruffling through the pathetic stack of papers that was the green-clad boy's case. Eraserhead hummed, swinging higher as he came across a building several floors taller than his current height. "I'm headed there now. Even if he is moving, I have a chance on finding him. I've already called Hisashi, so he'll be helping as he's in the area on patrol." He paused for a moment, spotting said blonde further down the road. "Don't send anyone else. We don't want to overwhelm the kid." "Understood." He hung up and hurled himself to the other side of street, hopping down and catching himself with his capture weapon. Eraserhead landed perfectly next to his boyfriend, and briskly walked in sync with him as if he were there to begin with. The few people nearby had jumped at his appearance, but present Mike didn't bat an eye. "I'll take the buildings to the left, you the right. Call if you find him. He has green hair and eyes. You'll know it's him if his hair resembles marsh." Present Mike snorted at that, the imagery too funny to ignore. He nodded, splitting up with the underground hero. Eraserhead combed through the buildings carefully, looking for signs of someone living in one. Considering it was the red light district, the chance was high. He started from the first floor, making sure to thoroughly search each room. There were only 3 buildings nearby that Midoriya could possibly access. The sun would set soon and it would be best to find Midoriya before then. They didn't want him to get into trouble. If he hadn't already. Eraserhead was just starting to leave the second building when his phone buzzed. It was a single message from Mike. "Banana cockatoo. Found him. Pinned location." Eraserhead didn't bother responding, instead, rushing towards the building Mike had searched. It was much larger than the other 2, so it wasn't a surprise the kid decided to pick it. He still had to cover all bases though. He rushed up the stairs. "Mike?" Eraserhead called out, following the pin down the hall. The dark-haired man peered into the room to see his boyfriend talking to someone that suspiciously looked like the missing kid. Midoriya was rambling about something. He didn't get the chance to hear as the green boy froze and turned towards him. Midoriya shifted uncomfortably, looking between Mike and him with weariness. Eraserhead joined his boyfriend on the floor next to the door. He crossed his legs and laid out his arms on them. "I'm Eraserhead, and I'm sure you already know this one." He grumbled but jokingly elbowed the blonde on duty. "Rude. You could be a bit nicer," Mike whispered. Eraserhead glared at him from the corner of his eye, huffing. Before he could say anything else, he noticed the stars in Midoriya's eyes. "You're Eraserhead?" He mumbled quietly, fiddling with the tips of his fingers. He furrowed his eyebrows. "You've heard of me?" Present Mike pressed his lips together, stifling his laughter. Midoriya nodded slowly, leaning forward enough to place the palms of his hands on the ground. Eraserhead noticed a bandage wrapped around his left hand. The green-haired boy held back a smile, but the corners of his mouth still quirked up. "Kid, we want to help you." He nodded towards the bandage. "People have been looking for you." Present Mike smiled, noticing the look in his boyfriend's eyes. "Even this old grump." He butted in, taking the man by one shoulder and lightly shaking him before laughing. Eraserhead grunted, not even bothering to push him off. He rolled his eyes and sighed. The hero locked eyes with the kid once Mike calmed down. "Will you let us help you?" He said it as gently as possible, but expected a fight. If he was hurt just as badly as he thought, then Midoriya would put up a fight. In his eyes, there was no way he could trust them. "Okay." Midoriya beamed, giggling. "I understand you don't trust us, even though we're heroes, but either way we won't let anyone hurt you." Present Mike slapped a hand to his mouth as Eraserhead went off on a tangent. He giggled behind it. He was expecting such a different answer that he didn't bother hearing the actual one. Mike reached out and shoved his boyfriend, not even batting an eye at the glare he received. The little listener said, "Okay. You didn't have to go on a rant." Izuku just blinked at the two before smiling softly. It's been a while since he's seen them like that. He ignored their bickering and walked up to them. "Okay." He repeated more softly, "I trust you, you're the best heroes. Even better than All Might." Yamada-sensei melted at the praise while Aizawa-sensei lightly blushed. It was true. He loved All Might, but he could be an idiot most of the time, and he never got over what he said when they first met. Aizawa-sensei blinked as the information suddenly clicked. "Wait, what?" Plus, Deku lifted his head slowly, looking around him. The rain hadn't stopped or even lessened, so why couldn't he feel it anymore? Then he looked behind him. His eyes went wide at the man crouched behind him. The man in black extended his free hand, the other hand holding an umbrella. When he took it, he was lifted off the wet ground. "I'm Aizawa Shoyuda." There was a shout behind him, so Deku peered around his torso. A tall blonde was running towards them. "That's Yamada Hisashi." Plus, Eraserhead stared at the child clinging to his hand, sharing a glance with his boyfriend. He glowered at the man, who was still cracking up. Midoriya refused to let go of his hand, even grabbing Mix as well. He grumbled and shoved his only free hand in his pocket as they walked to the nearest police station. As they walked, Midoriya would occasionally skip, Mike joining him. All the while, Eraserhead had no clue how to handle the runaway. "So, little listener, you said that we were better than All Might." Mike started, leaning down slightly. "Yeah." He immediately gushed. "All Might is really strong, but all he does is punch people. He can also be an idiot sometimes." Eraserhead snorted and sunk into his capture weapon. "He is an idiot," the underground hero stated, to which the ecstatic blonde dramatically gasped. He awkwardly reached for him with his free hand to lightly shove him. "Show!" he scolded. "Don't call me that on duty, Mike. You're so mean." "What did I do?" "It's only logical to call me by my name while on the job. You're not even patrolling." Izuku blinked as he looked between the two, smiling once more at their playful bickering. He shook his head, pulling at their hands when he saw the station come into view. He really hoped Tsukachi was there. He usually bounced between stations as needed. He knew his future teachers would believe what he said, but would the officers? Izuku is a quirkless child. They'd believe he was just being overdramatic. So he turned his head to look at the two. "Is Detective Tsukachi here?" "He has some work to do at another station, little listener." "How do you even know him?" Izuku ignored the latter, huffing and kicking his foot. "I want to talk to him. No one else." Yamada-sensei crouched down with a smile. "Why is that?" "He has a truth quirk, right?" They slowly nodded but looked confused. Aizawa-sensei sighed, leaning down enough to take his hand. "I don't know how you know him, but we'll go to the station he's in." "Happy?" Izuku eagerly nodded, smiling. His mood taking an immediate turn. "Ah. He just came out willingly?" Tsukachi asked quietly, clutching a clipboard to his chest. Aizawa-sensei nodded. Izuku stared at them, kicking his feet as he nibbled on the cookie Yamada-sensei had got him on the way before having to continue his. "Troll. I don't know how he knows you, but he wanted to speak to you. You only." He suppressed a smile, holding back a giggle at their faces. Tsukachi sighed and turned towards Izuku with a smile. "Am I allowed to record our conversation?" he asked politely. The green-eyed time traveler picked at the hem of his shirt, pretending to look nervous. Then he slowly nodded. "I am legally required to inform you of my quirk. It allows me to tell whether or not you're lying, which you seem to already know. So you can speak your mind." Izuku nodded. We'll start off with the simple questions. If you feel any need to stop, then we will. Are you Midoriya Izuku? He fidgeted. It was time to pull at their heartstrings. Legally. Yeah. True. Tsukachi furrowed his eyebrows. Legally? Izuku nodded with a shy look, forcing his eyes to get watery. Everyone calls me Deku. True. Why do they call you that? Because I'm a quirkless, worthless, useless being. Not even human. He mumbled, letting his actual feelings slip through. Or at least what they used to be. Then that changed once he reached UA, but it still popped up every once in a while. It's been sticking around since he came back, as he wasn't currently that Deku just yet. True. Aizawa huffed. You're more human than they are at that point. It isn't right for them to treat you that way, doesn't matter what your quirk is, or lack of. The detective nodded with a sad look, opting to move on. Why did you run away from home? I don't want to get her in trouble. Like, his eye twitched. Is it your mother? She's not as nice as she used to be, but I still love her, and I don't know why. Izuku sniffled. Maybe it was because she dealt with him even if he was a worthless nobody? He didn't know. He didn't know. Mom beat me up just like the kids at school, even called me names. But then there were days when she would just leave me alone and even make food. True. But then he gained one for all. She suddenly started being fake. He preferred when she didn't smile compared to the fake ones that just didn't reach her eyes or seemed a bit too forced. He preferred her harsh words compared to reassurances she didn't mean. There were days when everything and everyone seemed fake. Where All Might's happy-go-lucky attitude was just a bit too much, Ida's strictness made him feel controlled, or even Shudo's nonchalance felt like he didn't care. A soft pulse buzzed through his left hand, shooting up his spine and flooding his senses with a warmth he hasn't felt for a while. He indulged in the feeling, swiftly pulling said hand closer and cradling it with his other. It had snapped him far enough out of it to understand he was being talked to. Although the sounds were warbled and muffled, sounding as if underwater. It didn't help that everything around him was blurry, and his eyes burned. All it did was add to the feeling of being underwater. Izuku scrunched up his nose and whined lowly. Closing his eyes made the watercolors disappear, but not the sounds. Make it stop. He wanted to cover his ears to rid of the sound, but also didn't want to let go of the one thing grounding him, which was slowly fading, all the more reason to cherish it while it was there. Another hand prodded at his. The warmth threw him off balance at first, rivaling the fading pulse in his hand. He protested at the touch, whimpering once more. The movement paused, and Izuku calmed upon realizing it was not taking away his precious pulsing warmth away. A pulsing warmth that was no longer there. So, Izuku followed the direction the hands came in for more warmth. Warmth that would protect him from the icy sea of despair he was drowning in. He didn't realize he was instinctively holding his breath until he gasped for air. Tsukachi was not discreet by any means when he took the picture, ignoring Eraserhead's feeble attempts at blackmail. The detective was fearless when he sent it to the man's boyfriend. He simply raised an eyebrow as the hero cursed quietly. Do you want the forms now? He interrupted his monologue, already fishing the papers from his desk. With his mother coming forward, he didn't even need to say anything of the matter. However, he did without us even asking. That's enough to put her in jail for a while. Eraserhead sighed as his phone buzzed in his pocket, no doubt Mike gushing about the picture. He looked down at the child clutching onto him like he were a lifeline. Which, taking into consideration that Midoriya just had a panic attack, was probably true at the moment. He took the clipboard and pen, setting it on his knees and shifting the child to rest in his lap so he didn't have to be turned awkwardly. One hand was pressed against the back of the kid's head so he wouldn't fall backwards. Although, he doubted that would happen judging by how tight he was holding on. So he texted a crazy blonde with one hand. You want to do this? Screech. Of course. The little listener looks like he's already attached. I'm divorcing you. Screech. We're not even married. That's the point. Screech. So are we parents now? Screech. We need things. Like a car seat. You didn't take the car. Screech. We'll need it for later. Misu. Get a let. Eraserhead groaned, ignoring the knowing look of the detective sitting in his office chair. He glared, noticing the phone pointed at him. Don't you dare. Screech. What about a high chair? Misu. He not that small. Screech. Fuck you. Misu. Not anymore. Screech. Crying face. The life of a parent. Shudo winced as Fuyumi wrapped his injuries. I'm sorry, Shudo. Her bottom lip trembled. For what? He numbly asked, instinctively jerking away from the pain when she touched another burn on his arm. The 13-year-old didn't pause. I can't protect you like Mom could. She sighed. I promised I would. Shudo went quiet. It's not your fault. He looked away, feeling impending dread slowly crawl near. The boy watched the door closely, ignoring the burning in his limbs as best as he could. Fuyumi went silent, having no more to say. She knew her words would only fall on deaf ears. The white-haired girl finally finished the knot on the last bandage and slowly stood up. She lightly ruffled his hair with a smile. I can bring you some tea if you want. He shook his head and she left him alone. Shudo inhaled deeply. His mismatched gaze shifted to his soul mark as his chest tightened. It lightly throbbed in pain. This is the 4th time. He frowned, not counting the minor situations. The first time he felt it was a year and a half ago. He had cried, stating how his hand had ached. No one but Tuya knew what it meant. It's just your soulmate, Shudo. The teen crouched in front of him. Their mother stood just behind the eldest boy. Then why does it hurt so bad? He cried, not even bothering to wipe his tears in favor of holding his right hand. Tuya carded his fingers through his hair. Unless you feel pain anywhere else, it just means they're hurt inside. It's like a cry for help, they can feel it too from you. How do I help? The second time was almost a month ago. It was the middle of the night and hurt for hours. He didn't remember much as he was apparently delirious with a heavy fever. Odd considering his quirk. No one talked much about it, even his father had backed off for the next week. The 3rd and 4th were today, one early in the morning. The former was so short he didn't even need to step in as it was already disappearing by the time he woke up enough to understand why he was being jostled awake. Shudo was careful of his injuries when he laid down, sending comfort to his soulmate as he did. Doing so was difficult the first time around, and for the minuscule cries that were simply due to the wacky emotions of being a child. It was only after his mother poured boiling water on his face that it finally clicked. He remembered the sheer pain and fear he felt, screaming and crying, begging for it to stop. His soul mark shined and burned, pulsing with panic. Then the fire raging in his heart was blown out with a strong gust of wind. His pain disappeared and Shudo focused on the wind in his hair and whispers tickling his ears instead. It cooled his burning skin and eased his muscles. He smiled thinking about it, letting the warmth of his fire melt the uneasiness away, countering it with a cool dusting of snow to make it bearable. It took a while, but the suffocating feeling was finally beginning to wash away. He sighed in relief when it became a faint jab at the back of his own mind, a signal that they were okay. Good night, Izuku. The boy whispered. Where did he get that name from? Hizashi cooed at the sight once he walked into the station, internally screaming so loud it could be heard with his mouth closed. He was out of his hero costume with his hair in a bun. Those pictures do no justice. He yelled. Shoyuta ignored the comment and shoved the clipboard into the blonde's chest, who didn't look away. The pen clattered to the ground and he silently raised an eyebrow. As if he was going to get it. I'm so using Midoriya as an excuse to get you to do everything. He realized as the pro reached down for it. It would be difficult to bend down for it without dropping or disturbing the child in his arms. First, if you look that adorable holding him, I wouldn't be mad. Second, he's our son now. Stop calling him by his surname. You know those are only getting filed if he agrees to us taking him in, right? He pointed at the stack of papers. Tsukachi hummed in the background. I don't think he'll disagree, he seems very attached. Shoyuta froze as Hizashi giggled. He sighed and just gave up. He was panicking, of course he was going to cling to the person closest to him. Hizashi sat down next to him. He was panicking? Tsukachi let Shoyuta tell the man as he filed the report and went through the system to change his status. Meet him. He started talking about his mother and just spiraled. His breathing picked up and then he suddenly held it. The dark-haired man paused. Izuku held his own hand the entire time and didn't respond when we tried to calm him down. In fact, it kind of did the opposite, so I just offered him my hand. Then he did this. He gestured at himself. The detective chuckled. Poor little listener. Hisashi whined, glancing at his bandaged hand. Said hand was clutching at his boyfriend's shirt as if he would disappear in a moment's notice. Izuku's head was pressed against his collarbone, face turned just enough to breathe. Shoyuta had an arm underneath the listener with his other on his phone. The blonde reached for the boy, lightly running his fingers through the curls. Izuku groaned and tucked his face under Shuta's chin, who tilted his head just slightly to accommodate. Hisashi smiled. Tsukachi. Look at him. Shoyuta blushed. Izuku's going to take the world by storm someday. How is your arm not numb? Hisashi stared. It is. He deadpanned. Just sign the DM paper so we can get home. You better be taking off for this. The off-duty hero crossed his arms after taking Izuku's bag. Shoyuta glared. What do I look like to you? Hisashi pretended to think about it, looking him up and down as if he weren't sure. A very tired old hobo kidnapping a child disguised as a giant broccoli. He stated seriously as they walked out. Shoyuta snorted. I'm sure that's what all the police officers would think if they didn't know I was a hero. They did look very surprised. He agreed, then perked up. Shoyuta gave him a horrified look, noticing the determined look on his face. He dubbed it the "I'm about to ruin your life by embarrassment" face. He needed a shorter name. Zashi. He warned, bracing a hand on Izuku's back as he sped up to catch the cackling hero. His fears were soon confirmed by the consistent buzzing in his pocket. He slumped his shoulders in defeat. It was too late to save himself. Shoyuta knocked his free elbow against his boyfriend's as they took a seat on the train. He refused to check his phone. Izuku woke up slowly, opening his eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling. Firstly, he registered how shitty he was feeling. Panic attacks were never fun and he often got sick after really bad ones. Izuku sat up with a groan, a damp rag falling into his lap. The cold water seeping through his shorts brought him to his senses. He was with Aizawa-sensei last. That meant he was probably taken somewhere. If it weren't for the fact that the bed he rested on was the only one in the room, he would have thought he was in an orphanage. After all, he hadn't done much to get Aizawa-sensei to take him in. Izuku rubbed at the corner of his eyes and yawned, swiftly throwing his legs over the edge. Hesitantly, he peered through the crack in the door. The only light he could see was probably from a TV, bright in contrast to the pitch-black surroundings. The future pro hobbled down the short hall. Eraserhead? He questioned. The man turned towards him with a slightly disturbed look in the one eye he could see. Aizawa-sensei just nudged a half-asleep Yamada-sensei, who jolted and paused the movie. Just call me Aizawa, kid. Yamada for him. He grunted, then leaned forward, closer to eye level. Izuku rounded the couch to see him better. Is there something you wanted? The green-haired boy scuffed his bare feet on the floor. Where at I? Is this some kind of weird orphanage? No, you're at our apartment. Aizawa spared a quick glance at the blonde next to him, his gaze holding a short conversation. Yamada gave a minuscule nod, standing up and disappearing where Izuku came from. Izuku watched as he left, before turning back to the underground hero. Are you going to send me to one? His words were almost inaudible. Aizawa huffed. Only if you want us to, but I don't think Zashi would approve of doing that. You are absolutely, positively correct. Said man burst out from the hallway with a large blanket, sending a quick half-hearted at his boyfriend. The blonde draped it over the arm. He then turned to Izuku, as if we'll let that happen. Yamada went to make a move to ruffle his hair, but paused and backed off before he could flinch. Then where would I go? With us, of course. The radio host smiled brightly, then backpedaled. Only if you want. He assured, making sure not to force him. But you don't know me. I don't know you. He mumbled, but the last part was a lie they hopefully didn't pick up. Aizawa hummed, "You can make up your mind after we get to know each other." He pointed out, then took the blanket from where Yamada put it. "But for now, you need to sleep, it's 11 o'clock. The blanket was heavy, weighing down his legs, and he immediately panicked. It felt as if we're underwater once more. Feeling as his limbs were lead, he cried out, kicking and pushing it. Yamada was the first one in action, grabbing it by the edge and yanking away with so much force he stumbled backwards. The weighted blanket was then tossed down the hall with a surprising amount of strength and landed with a thud. "It's gone! It's gone!" He crouched in front of him as Izuku pulled his knees to his heaving chest. Tears were in the corner of his eyes and he felt really hot from the sudden panic. "Hey, it's okay. It's not here anymore." Aizawa slowly and gently prodded at his hands. Izuku let him grab one. With Yamada whispering reassurances and Aizawa guiding his breathing, the panic was over pretty quick. He hummed and wiped at the stray tear, pulling his hand away from the dark-haired man's chest. "No heavy blankets, got it?" Aizawa stood up, knowing the oldest could handle the situation. The voice hero waved him off, his attention solely on Izuku, who shifted closer. "I'm sorry that I don't know why I did that." He took a deep breath. The time traveler never had a problem with them before. Shudo or Kaken would always get angry when he pushed himself and never got enough sleep. So, they'd toss a weighted blanket at him and force him to sleep. Sometimes they'd even pin him down if he was being particularly stubborn. Yamada hummed, "Can I touch you?" he politely asked. With his permission, the hero pressed the back of his hand to his forehead. Izuku winced as it throbbed, but then relaxed against how cold his hand was. It was refreshing. Yamada hissed, feeling his cheeks as well, "If you weren't burning up earlier, then you sure are now." He lifted him by the armpits and situated Izuku on his hip, quickly moving towards the kitchen. "I always get like this after that. I'm fine though, I've had worse." The blonde frowned at the thought, squeezing out the rag he had dug from underneath the sink. He gently pressed it to his flushed face, to which Izuku ummed in relief and pressed his face into it. Out in the living room, Aizawa had pushed back the coffee table and worked on rearranging an odd assortment of mismatched blankets on the ground. He looked up at the two, quirking an eyebrow. "He's burning up, Sho." Yamada responded to his look. Izuku yawned, "If I stay with you, what'll happen to Mom?" "It doesn't matter where you stay, you're not going back." Yamada provided, placing him down on the soft, temporary bed. He pulled back the wet rag, causing him to whine in protest and reach out for it. Before he could, it was wrapped around his head and loosely tied in the back. "He's like a mini joke." Aizawa's eyes went wide in terror, gasping sharply. "How dare you taint him?" He glared at the male he dared call his boyfriend. The look on his face told Yamada he was close to being beach-slapped. "You're lucky," he whispered, his glance fleeting towards Izuku. He was ignored. Instead, Izuku was tucked in and placed between both heroes. "So, Mom's going to jail?" "It was wrong of her to treat you that way," Aizawa grumbled, tossing an arm over his eyes. "But I'm quirkless. That doesn't make it any better. You're still human." Yamada glanced at the bandage covering his hand. The only reason they weren't all too concerned about it was due to his Midoriya's words. It was a scar left behind by his father 2 years ago, and also hid his soul mark. "I want to stay with you," he whispered, almost inaudible. "Okay, little listener." Izuku closed his eyes and thought for so long, they believed he were asleep. He eventually made up his mind, "I don't want to be a Midoriya." "All right," Aizawa drawled, peeking out from underneath his own skin. His dark eyes locked with hypnotic, green ones. Izuku's breathing evened out, tension releasing from his shoulders. They almost didn't hear what he said next. "I want to see us." The last couple words trailed off as if blown away by an imaginary wind. If they hadn't agreed to give this kid the best childhood they could before, they sure did now. Izuku stared at the mark adorning Yamada's elbow with an odd look. The man was currently cooking breakfast and had rolled up his sleeves. "Is that your soul mark?" he asked, looking up at him. "Of course." He giggled, winking at the boy who donned a freshly wet bandana. Sho has it on the opposite arm. It's why we, Yamada lightly bumped into him, nudge each other all the time. The said mark was a simple black cat swatting at a couple music notes floating around its head, about the same height as his palm. It rested directly underneath his elbow on the side, which would perfectly collide if they did bump into each other. Izuku smiled sadly. Can you wake up Sho for me? The man dumped another pancake onto the stack. He swiftly nodded and ran out of the room. Aizawa was asleep in the same position and he passed out in. He had an arm over his face with the other spread out and a leg crossed over the other. He snorted at the sight. Izuku crouched down, poking the man in the ribs. Aizawa awoke with an inhale, shifting his arm down and staring at him with one eye open. His gaze softened upon noticing it was Izuku. He hummed, "Pancakes?" The underground hero's voice was raspy, sitting up and revealing the tangled rat's nest on his head. This time he didn't bother hiding his laugh. "Yeah!" Yamada yelled from the other room, laughing when he heard the pillow hit the wall. Izuku sent a sad look at his own soul mark as the two bickered. Izuku's fever had lessened enough to barely classify as one. So Aizawa and Yamada had allowed him to go to school the next day, which honestly felt wrong to him. He hadn't gone in years and the first day he had been back didn't count. The boy huffed with crossed arms as Aizawa pushed him forward into the gates. The only reason Yamada wasn't there was because he was too noticeable in his hero garb. "I don't wanna," he whined, digging his feet into the ground. Aizawa sighed. "I hated school too, but you have to go. You're already behind by a month as it is." He ruffled his hair. Why did everyone keep doing that? Not that he would say anything about it. With a hesitant goodbye, Izuku was off to class as they hurried to work. He gripped his bag tight as he entered class for the first time in weeks. Everyone glared as if they hadn't even noticed he was gone. Izuku sighed. Black Cat shimmied out the window, glad Aizawa had already left and Yamada was a heavy sleeper. His fingers dug into the sill as he fell with a grunt. The vigilante kicked at the wall, trying to find a spot where he could climb. He knew there was a fire escape somewhere nearby, but Black Cat just couldn't find it. It was probably near the balcony, judging as that's where Aizawa left from. But he wasn't going to risk leaving his room and getting caught by Yamada on his way out. The time traveler had slid down enough to safely drop, rolling as he hit the ground. Black Cat immediately scurried away, searching for a way up. But right there, a ladder scaling up the side of a building. Behind his mask, he smirked as he headed towards where Eraserhead should be by now. Considering the man only left about 10 minutes before him and had to stop crime along the way, he couldn't be too far. Black Cat stopped on the edge of the roof, peering down into the alley. Eraserhead was just tying up an unconscious criminal. He laughed at the pro. "Haven't seen you in a few days, huh?" The vigilante roughly called out. The man looked up and his face slowly formed a grimace. "Black Cat." He greeted quietly and taking a step back. "Haven't heard of you causing any trouble for a few days." He countered. "I may or may not have had a little run-in with someone. Long story short, the fucker kidnapped me." "Of course you just casually admit you were kidnapped." Eraserhead rolled his eyes, using his capture weapon to pull himself up to the roof Black Cat occupied. The vigilante snorted. "I didn't need anyone's demon help and I still don't." Eraserhead raised an eyebrow. "What about Izuku?" "I didn't need help, he did." Black Cat didn't notice his use of past tense, but Eraserhead did. He also didn't mention how neither of the Midoriyas were allergic to cats. "Anyways, I did find him," he drawled out. "You did?" I mean." Black Cat was quick to head home, rushing towards the apartment at full speed. Sheet. He couldn't afford to get caught now. Eraserhead was on his way back and Black Cat couldn't just follow him, and if he took the long way he'd be home late. He stumbled as he came across the building. He could just see Eraserhead in the distance to his left. Wait, how was he supposed to get in? Jump. Yep, he took a big risk and jumped for it. Not any kind of jump, mind you. Black Cat slammed into the side of the building with a pained grunt. He slid down a bit, scrambling for a foothold anything. His window was right there. The time traveler got his hold onto his own window, hastily pulling himself up. He rolled inside with a thump. He hoped that didn't wake up Yamada. Izuku was quick to shut his window and rip off his gear. He shoved them under the bed he inhabited and heard the slider door open in the living room. His face grew pale and he swiftly shoved on the pair of pajamas he had on earlier. The green-haired boy just managed to put on his shirt when his door slowly swung open. His wide eyes met with Aizawa's. What are you doing up?" he questioned, letting go of the handle in his grasp. Izuku avoided his gaze. Ko couldn't sleep. Aizawa yawned, taking a step forward and ruffling his hair. "What about that thud?" Izuku internally screamed. Had he really heard that despite being outside? Was his hearing that good? Aya rolled out of bed. He simply excused it. "I'm sorry. I'm not going to hurt you because you made a loud noise. Hell, I would never hurt you to begin with." He dismissed it. Izuku nervously smiled up at him, letting him tuck him back into bed. The future pro didn't miss how his glance looked at his bandaged hand and frowned before moving to leave the room. He looked as if he had something to say. "Did you miss Yamada before you met him?" Aizawa paused. "Maybe I did. Are you missing yours?" Izuku hesitantly nodded. "They're warm." He provided, causing Aizawa to turn around. The tired hobo sat on the edge of his bed. "Are they?" He hummed, brushing his hand across his forehead. "They could have a fire quirk." The boy blinked. How did he know that? There was no way the man had come back in time with him and somehow managed to hide it from Izuku of all people. Was Yamada back too? Is so? What makes you think that? It's called neuropeutic salations. He sighed. That's a big word. Aizawa hummed in agreement. It's just a complicated term for the science behind the comfort they provide through the soul mark. How it feels on your side is due to their quirk. If you feel warm when they send that comfort, then they have a quirk related to heat. Oh. Izuku had never heard of that before. He just believed it was a coincidence. What does your comfort thingy feel like? The pro snorted quietly, hiding his face in his capture weapon. Zashi feels his pain go numb when I send it, and my whole body vibrates when he sends it. The 23-year-old in a 6-year-old's body thought for a second. If I'm quirkless, then what does mine feel like? Aizawa paused, shaking his head. I don't know, kid. Show. The paperwork went through. Hizashi shouted as he barreled through the door, kicking his shoes off with a hurry. I know. The man sighed, blinking away his own quirk. Aghida, we're parents now. The blonde just collapsed to the ground, his arms spread in front of him. Izuku poked his head into the living room. Ada, what's wrong with him? He's screaming into the floor. He deadpanned. Shoyuta leaned back, a subtle smile gracing his lips. Welcome to the family. You're officially ours. As though agreeing with his words, Marshmallow jumped down from the back of the couch and rubbed against his leg. Izuku picked up the cat without blinking, letting her dangle from his tight grip. His lip quivered and his vision got blurrier. That was quick. Hizashi quickly went quiet and looked up at realizing his son was beginning to cry. However, Shoyuta gave a fond sigh and beckoned him closer. The green-haired boy slowly shuffled towards the underground hero, and Shoyuta tucked him in his side. Then sent a glance towards his boyfriend. The blonde got up quicker than an Ida and rushed forward. Marshmallow didn't seem to mind being squished, even purring. Now I've got 2 crybabies. He gave a glare without the heat. Izuku's choked out a laugh and Hizashi, whose eyes definitely weren't watery, snorted. You know you love us, babe. The voice hero stuck out his tongue, picking Izuku and Marsh up and hugged both of them tightly to prove his point. It's only logical that I love my family. He grunted, crossing his arms. Great. They were both crying now. It didn't take too long for them to calm down. But by the time they were, it was time for bed. So, what do I call you now? Izuku yawned as they tucked him in. He was mentally 23, but he wouldn't ruin this chance. No matter how embarrassing it felt as first. The two paused and looked at each other. Anything you want, little listener. Before they went out the door, Yamada turned back. Would you be okay with people coming over tomorrow? So, who's coming over again? Izuku asked as Yamada placed a bowl of miso soup in front of him. Zashi's parents and my gram, they want to meet you. We tried to hold it off as his parents can be very overbearing. He sent an accusing look towards the blonde. Yamada gasped and placed a hand on his heart. How dare you? They have the best intentions in mind. He froze and pursed his lips. Yeah. He slowly agreed. His boyfriend smirked. They cried harder about our first date than they did their own wedding. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. How do you know? Yamada narrowed his eyes. Izuku just leaned forward, pulling a shudo and watched the drama unfold. They're your parents, Zashi. They talk. His soulmate just wordlessly gaped, chopsticks hanging from his fingers. His mouth opened and closed and he slowly looked down with the sudden realization. So that's where you were getting all this embarrassing information. He whispered, so quiet that neither male almost couldn't hear it. Surprisingly, they snorted anyway. You traitor! Izuku stared at the old woman that stood by the door. Rugi Motejuru immediately knew what he meant and bellowed out a laugh. A traitor I am indeed. She ruffled his hair before stepping out of the way. Izuku only had 3 seconds to scream. Aizawa? Yuji-sensei asked upon seeing the name at the top of her list. She double-checked the name. Aizawa Izuku? I got adopted, so my surname changed, sensei. Izuku quickly explained with a raised hand. While the paperwork itself had gone through a week ago, his name change had to also go through the school, so it was a bit delayed. Yuji-sensei sent him a concerned but also relieved glance. Kaken immediately raged. What about Auntie? He slammed his palm onto the boy's desk, causing Izuku to involuntarily flinch. The teacher glared at the boy. Bakugo, I suggest you calm down this instant, young man. As the only staff member willing to punish him, Kaken backed down. Izuku had always liked Yuji-sensei. She was an old woman with a weak water manipulation quirk. A flick of her wrist and she could toss a tennis ball-sized bit of water. Due to her old age and weak quirk, she never tolerated discrimination as her generation still had quite a few quirkless people. Although, she couldn't do much outside of her class, as the principal would wave off her ever concern when it came to him or Kaken. She was right behind his teachers from UA, not like she had any competition. Kaken scowled in his seat, his face red with anger. He glared at the time traveler with a look that rivaled anything Izuku had ever seen in his face. He frowned. Later on in the day, Izuku ran as fast as he could the moment the bell rang. Kaken was too young to figure out he could use his quirk to propel himself forward, and coupled with the training he had as Black Cat, Izuku was much faster. His feet hit the concrete as he could hear Kaken's explosive rage from inside the building behind him. The vigilante was quick to take a turn down the alley as his childhood friend exited the school. He climbed up the wall, no longer needing a ladder or fire escape to get up. It still took a bit longer than he liked, but it was possible. Izuku ducked down on the roof, hoping no one could see him. If he was spotted, the suspicion would be too much to get away from. If he got home a little later than usual, then it was because he got lost. He wasn't exactly used to heading a different way than usual, especially when he hadn't been to that school in years. Neither of his guardians mentioned that he had officially been theirs for a week, simply sharing a look with each other. It was a lot harder to avoid Kaken the next day. In the morning, Izuku had positioned himself underneath his classroom window, which luckily faced the back of the school, and hid there for as long as possible. When the warning bell rang, he had entered the room with perfect timing, as Yuji-sensei was already sitting down. Izuku slid into his seat with a relieved sigh, sending a discreet look towards the head of dull blonde. He gulped, feeling his anger was worse than before. Deku! Kaken scowled as he blocked the way to the door when it was time for lunch. Izuku took a step back, but his path was blocked by his lackeys. He bit his lip, so exiting through the window wasn't an option. You have some explaining to do, demon nerd. Pops came from his palms. Kaken I. He flinched as a larger explosion came. The future pro shifted a foot back, pushing off and sliding underneath his friend. The explosive blonde quickly turned and attempted to grab him by the scruff on his jacket, but failed. Get back here, shitty D. The three of them pursued after him, his palms radiating his usual explosions. Other students quickly jumped out of the way, no one bothering to help him. He even saw a teacher hide his face behind a folder and duck into a classroom. Two girls to his left giggled, one being pushed straight into him. Izuku tumbled into the ground as the girls backed away with signature grins, running out of sight. There was hardly anyone left in the halls as Kaken tackled him right back to the ground. The green-eyed boy groaned in pain as his head hit the floor. He squirmed from underneath his captor and clawed at the hands holding his head to the ground. Sweaty fingers pulled at his hair. What the hell happened to Auntie Deku? Kaken demanded. The time traveler kicked at him, managing to painfully turn and threw him off. Izuku scrambled back, but was taken a hold of by the others. He shook them off easily. Kaken took him by the scruff, throwing him right back on the floor. The air was knocked right out of him. It didn't help that Kaken placed his foot right on his ribs. He wheezed. I said, "Of course, why you care more abo about her than me?" Izuku grit out, shoving his foot off. It caused Kaken to be thrown off balance. He rolled over but he was pinned down once more. One lackey had a foot on his wrist while the other simply sat on his lower legs. Izuku forced himself to relax, refusing to show that it hurt. He panted, gaining back his breath. She's better than your useless butt, Deku. Kaken kicked him. She's just like you. He glared, a rare type of anger filling his chest. As if she cares about me. Kaken practically growled, kicking him in the head. Liar. Auntie is the most caring person to exist. You call ignoring me caring? The blonde glared harder, if it were possible. Not making food? Another kick. Called names? Another kick. What about being beaten half to death over something so idiotic? Kaken exploded in all ways possible. Shuda's phone buzzed in his phone, his ringer on full blare. A few of his coworkers sent him glances, knowing the situation just by the fact that it was not silenced. Places like hospitals, police stations and pro-hero agencies had the option to bypass a phone being on silent or even shut off if the call were an emergency. The underground hero was quick to press the answer button, standing up and heading towards the hall where it would be empty. Lunch had just started. Hello. Are you Aizawa Shoyuta? Was the first thing the woman in the other line said. Shoyuta nodded to himself. Yes, I am. We're calling you to inform you of the hospitalization of Aizawa Izuku. He was admitted just under an hour ago to Muzutafu General Hospital. His heart dropped, face going pale. Hisashi. We have to go. The door to the staff lounge slammed open, scaring half of his coworkers to death. The man was never like this. Namuri, we're borrowing the car. Sho? What's going on? He asked, rushing up so quick his chair rolled backwards. Namuri stopped it from going too far, placing her hands on the back after tossing the keys to the man. Is everything okay? Her question went unanswered as the two disappeared. Ectoplasm was the one to speak up. Perhaps something happened to Eraserhead's grandmother. She is getting quite old. Then why would Mike go along? Namuri pushed the blonde's chair back into place. Well, the two are dating. Nizu popped out of the vent from the ceiling, landing in Yamada's seat. Midnight, you'll be covering present mix English class for the afternoon. They all stared at their boss with equal looks of terror and confusion. Of course you were listening. Snipe pointed out. Where are we going? Hisashi asked as they raced towards the parking lot, attempting to reach for the keys held in his soulmate's hands. The hospital. Apparently there was an accident at the school. Hisashi paled, resigning himself to the fate of letting Shoyuta drive. He hastily buckled in. An accident? Do you know what happened? The pro shook his head, already pulling out the parking lot with a speed that shouldn't be possible while in reverse. Hisashi held on for dear life as they practically flew down the road. How bad is it? I'm not sure, but her tone wasn't reassuring. The two of them entered the hospital with sunken hearts, fingers entwined tightly. We're here for Aizawa Izuku. Hisashi was the one to speak up, knowing the possibility of the dark-haired male snapping at someone. Aizawa Izuku, Aizawa Aizua. He's in room 284 in the pediatric ward. He'll soon be open for visitors as soon as he's out of immediate risk. Hisashi was pulled down the hall with a yelp and shoved into an elevator. He's only been in our care for a week, Zashi. Shoyuta sighed, resting his head into his hands. The blonde pulled his boyfriend closer, letting his emotions run course. He just gave silent support as he sorted through them. It'll be okay, the little listener is strong. They sat there for who knows how long before a doctor exited the room. The two immediately looked up. He gave them a comforting smile. You are Aizawa and Yamada, correct? They nodded. I am Dr. Tansho Miru. I will be in charge of Aizawa Izuku's care. Is he okay? The doctor nodded. He is at no risk, and his injuries will heal well. In fact, Izuku is now open to visitors. Shoyuta sighed in relief, his boyfriend following. What's the list of injuries? It would be logical to understand how hurt he was before going in so they didn't freak out. Dr. Tansho sent them a glance before reading through his papers. Izuku has an oblique break in the forearm and wrist with a few second-degree burns and a single third one, which was very close to his ear. Along with those, he had superficial scraps and bruises. However, our biggest concern lies with his brain. Oh God! Hisashi gripped his soulmate tightly. What's wrong with his brain? Blunt force trauma to the parietal and occipital lobes, both of which are located at the back of the head. Neither seem too severe, but you can never be too careful. Brain injuries tend to affect some people differently. He flipped through the sheets on his clipboard. That's from an accident at school? Shoyuta scowled. Caused by a powerful quirk, nonetheless. Although, between you and me, I don't believe it was an accident. Then again, I was only briefed on the situation. You'd have to get the full account from Izuku himself, but I'd suggest treading lightly until we've gotten a full read of the effects. The two nodded in understanding, bowing as he left. Together, the couple took in a deep breath before entering the hospital room. It sounded worse than it looks. Hisashi reassured, gesturing for him to sit down on the chair next to the bed before pulling another one over for himself. Izuku's right arm was covered in a cast, leaving only the tips of his fingers free, and his other arm was wrapped with bandages alongside his head. Otherwise, he only had scraps and blooming bruises. Of course, he was connected to the usual machines. But honestly, they were expecting worse. Not an accident, huh? Shoyuta wondered aloud, crossing his arms. There's no way it could be. Hisashi agreed, letting the man lean on him. There has to be a report or something. Maybe we could call the school. He suggested. Shoyuta dug his phone from his pocket. That sounds like a good idea, but wouldn't they also call to inform us what happened? He quickly searched the number, dialing it. Aldera Elementary. A man answered distastefully. Hisashi immediately hated that tone and took the phone. Hello, I'm Yamada Hisashi and I'm calling about my son, Aizawa Izuku. Shoyuta gave him a look, raising an eyebrow. He was waved off. The man on the other end hummed. I'm presuming you're calling as to figure out how he got to the hospital. Why else? Yamada stated. Well, Aizawa is a troublemaker. He's cons. Okay. I'm going to stop you right there. Firstly, what were you about to call him? Second, he is far from a troublemaker. Lastly, we want to know exactly what happened. We don't need the simple excuse of him being a troublemaker. Well, he wants everyone to call him Deku. As for what happened, he sought out a fight with our strongest student. We all know he's that fragile, so it's not a surprise that he got hurt. Shoyuta seethed and snatched the phone back from his boyfriend and had to control himself as to not curse out the man. So instead, he hung up. FING quirk discrimination. Mitsuki was livid. She was an angry woman, but never had her rage reached this kind of level. The blonde had been called to the school to pick up Katsuki, who had gotten into a fight. He suffered a fractured wrist, sprained ankle, and minor concussion. Other than that, he was covered in bruises. That's not what she was angry about. No, it was that Katsuki had sought out the fight and severely injured the other student involved. Even worse, the student was Izuku. Go to your room. She told him the second they walked through the door. He was obviously shaken by her collected attitude, so Katsuki went without a peep. The woman plopped on the couch with her head in her hands. Mitsuki? What happened? Masaru asked, sitting right next to her. She took in a deep breath. Katsuki heard Izuku, really bad, Masaru. He's in the hospital and I. Mitsuki sighed. Deep breaths. We both know how Inko pulled away from us. He nodded. Apparently, she had been abusing Izuku. I should have realized. She was our best friend and she. Masaru rubbed her back, being the calm, cool, collected person he was. I'm assuming that Katsuki got mad at that? He knew as much as we did. Izuku was recently adopted and had his last name changed. He got mad at that. The thing is, I'm not sure how to contact him to apologize and make it right, at the very least. Her husband sighed. You're right, we have to fix this. I'm sure if we explain the situation to the school, they'll give us a way to contact them. I can call them if you'd like. Please do, otherwise I may snap. Izuku woke up slowly, his eyes opening up to a very bright room. He groaned in discomfort. Izuku! Hisashi called out, shaking Shoyuta, who was ranting on the phone with someone. They scrambled towards the bed, Hisashi helping the boy sit up while Shoyuta hit the call button. Izuku attempted to open his eyes again, only to in pain. He tipped his head downward and whined. Is it too bright? Shoyuta asked, already moving to shut off the light switch. His eyes were sensitive so he understood how the boy felt. Dr. Tansho walked in with a comforting smile. Hello, Yamada, Aizawa. I'll be checking in on Izuku now. You can stay or leave. Whichever you're more comfortable with. I understand if you don't feel like having me in the room alone with him. Shoyuta sent Hisashi a questioning look at that as they backed away. Some parents are fiercely protective. He answered, taking him by the arm. Izuku, how are you feeling? He asked. Izuku groaned and slowly tilted his head up and looked in his direction, to which he squinted heavily before blinking and rubbing at his eyes. He mumbled, looking back up. How are you feeling? Dr. Tansho repeated louder, observing his head and face, although his attention was mainly on the eyes and ears. Izuku pressed his lips into a thin line. Can you speak louder? He asked. His eyebrows furrowed in confusion, then repeated the question to himself. A third burn near his ear. Hisashi repeated Dr. Tansho's earlier words. Shoyuta frowned at that. His eyes are the biggest concern, Zashi. We can handle his hearing problem. Instead, Dr. Tansho hummed, shuffling closer and pulling a small flashlight from his pocket. He gently took Izuku by the chin and turned him to face him. The light was shined in his left eye, to which Izuku didn't react. However, Izuku jerked away with a whimper when the other side was tested. Well, other than his hearing and sight, there are no other major problems present. We'll have to do another scan later to see the full extent of them. Now, the parietal lobe assists with coordination, processing, and interpretation of sensory information. The occipital lobe is responsible for visual processing and perception. So if any problems come up relating to those, don't be too alarmed. Both nodded as the man quickly left, jotting things down on his clipboard. They both nodded, sitting on either side of their son. Hisashi took the hand without a cast on it, which contained the soul mark. Izuku hummed, squinting again. Papa? He asked, causing Hisashi's heart to melt. Izuku then turned his head, finding the blurred blob of black on his left. Dad? Shoyuta made sure to nod largely, figuring he could see the movement. He could, judging by the smile. He ignored the skip in his heart at hearing the name. Hisashi dug through his pockets, finding his phone and opening his notes. It was soon shoved into Izuku's hand. After making sure he turned down the brightness, of course. Izuku brought it close to his face, not far. What did you ask? How far he could see clearly. Hisashi chuckled, watching as Izuku brought his hand in and away from his face. Nodding when he got his limit, which was about 3/4 the length of his arm. And just like that, they continued to talk through the phone to him, all while ignoring any calls either of them got. One number called a few different times, before simply leaving a message. Everyone ignored it. Although it wasn't long until Izuku began to feel tired again, so after deciding he would be okay by himself, the two of them left. They drove back home using Nomuri's car to grab things like clothes and simple games that could keep Izuku occupied. Hisashi turned, staring at his boyfriend. He blinked, looking down at the backpack he held. His hypnotic eyes narrowed. What's in the bag? Nothing. The bag moved. Show. He crossed his arms. Let the cat out of the bag. Yuta put it over one shoulder, ignoring him. What cat? Marsh is in our room. Hisashi sent him an unamused look. I'm not falling for that. He raised an eyebrow. The underground hero stuffed his hands in his pockets, taking a couple steps towards the door. We're not taking Marsh to the hospital. His boyfriend sent a glance towards the ground, suddenly pointing at it and taking off with great speed. What a... Curses then proceeded to fly from his mouth. In the end, Yuta got to smuggle the cat into the hospital room the next day. None of the staff realized, even when he put the backpack on the floor and let the cat out of the bag at the door. They both shared a glance with each other as Marsh trotted over to her new favorite person. Izuku seemed more down than he was yesterday. Neither had said anything about it in case it were to trigger anything. Izuku didn't notice Marsh until he was bombarded with a ball of fur just as unruly as his own hair. He giggled, wrapping his arms around the cat the best he could. Marsh rubbed her face against his, careful of the burn. Hisashi took a bunch of pictures, no longer sulking from the move Yuta had pulled on him earlier. Izuku looked in their direction, his gaze off. Papa? Dad? He asked, which absolutely warmed their hearts. It's us, little listener. Hisashi threw his hands in the air, waving them dramatically. Izuku gave a small smile at the motion. You feeling okay? Yuta passed his phone when he sat down. Izuku clumsily took it with his only functional hand, only to frown upon seeing it. I'm okay. He held it back out. Just sad. Hisashi tilted his head in an obvious way, making sure the blurry motion could be seen. Why? Kaken. He provided, not giving much to go off. Casey-chan, is that the kid who did this to you? Was asked through the phone as per usual. Izuku seemed to think about it for a second. No. Kaken's no longer Kaken. Kaken was a friend, now he's Bakugo again. Hisashi and Yuta shared a conversation through their gaze, understanding what he meant. Kaken was a nickname for a friend whose real name is Bakugo. Izuku looked down at the blob of white in his lap. Kaken is Bakugo. He whispered to himself, or what he thought was a whisper. Izuku didn't exactly have the hearing to realize that. Then the tears came, slow and steady unlike usual. It was oddly silent. Kaken would never hurt Izuku, but Bakugo would hurt Deku. Hisashi shifted closer, gently pulling Izuku to his chest as the 6-year-old finally came to the realization. Is it okay to ask what he did? Yuta set the phone in Izuku's lap. The green-eye boy was silent for a couple moments. Bakugo thinks mom was good, so he got angry when he found out what happened and thought I lied. He went. Izuku paused, then held out his hands with the palms up. He made them into the shape of a claw. He suddenly said, jerking backwards. Okay, serious topics aside, Yuta just had to admit that the way Izuku did it was absolutely adorable. Hisashi lifted his hands. Bam! He threw them in the air like he did earlier. Izuku nodded with a serious look on his face. Bam! Yuta snorted, hiding his smile behind his capture weapon. The door opened, and he immediately dove for the cat. Although it was too late. Dr. Tansho stared at the scene he had entered to. His wide eyes glanced towards the cat, took several paces forward and proceeded to pet Marsh. I won't tell. He whispered. He and Hisashi sighed in relief. I told you it'd be fine. The blonde swatted at him. Izuku furrowed his eyebrows at the doctor, who waved at him. He smiled. When can I go home? We'll see. Dr. Tansho wrote on the bottom of his paper, letting Izuku take it for a moment. Izuku frowned, but nodded. He was smart and realized it would be a lengthy conversation. It'd be best if he simply got the end result from his parents. After that, it was a simple evaluation of his current condition. Nothing had changed except for the fact that he was sore, his hearing hadn't improved and neither had his sight. Although they were going to run tests later once he had healed more and see if glasses would help, along with fitting him for hearing aids. Dr. Tansho turned to Hizashi and Shoyuta. Well, nothing has gotten worse and seems to be on the track to recovery. He quickly stated. What about his hearing and sight? The man hummed. His hearing can be helped with hearing aids, so we know that's not a big issue and that you two are more than prepared to when it comes to that. Hizashi smiled and nodded at that, knowing he was being referred to. His sight. We could see if glasses can do any justice once his eyes have adjusted and healed. However, Izuku will be permanently blind in his left. There is hope for the other. Right now, all we need is patience. They were both relieved at that, but decided to speak up about what they found out earlier. Shortly before you came in, Izuku told us the basics of what happened. Apparently, they were childhood friends and the kid got angry at him. He had an explosion quirk. That makes plenty sense. The burns and hearing can be tied to the use of his quirk while the blow to the head explains his vision. Although the flashes of light and smoke wouldn't help. Anyways, Hizashi spoke up. When could the little listener be discharged? We did ask a colleague to stop by to help the process go quicker. Dr. Tansho furrowed his eyebrows. And who would that be? Recovery girl. Shoyuta answered. His eyes lit up, a faint smile showing up on his face. That certainly would make it go faster. If she were to heal him, judging by his current stamina, it would cut the time in half. We were only going to keep him for about a week or two because of his head trauma, as his other injuries are relatively minor. So, this is me guessing here, but with Recovery Girl's quirk and depending on the results of the scans we're taking later, he could be discharged in a week at most. Hizashi blinked. That's a lot shorter than I would have thought he'd stay. But it's nice that he can go home quicker. Shoyuta agreed, watching as he left. It is very reassuring. They turned their gaze to Izuku, who seemed on the verge on sleep with Marsh in his lap. In the meantime, we have a school to take down. Shoyuta gave his boyfriend a look. No, we're not taking them down. We're blowing them up, tearing the remaining bits to shreds, then setting that on fire and feeding the ashes to the demons known as dogs. Hizashi sweat dropped. Hello. This is Bakuga-Masaru. We heard what happened. To Izuku. We were hoping to meet up and set things right. Shoyuta played the voicemail over and over to the point where Hizashi just snatched it from him with a groan. You're being infuriating, babe. He tapped away on it. There. The blonde dramatically handed it back. The dark-haired male sent him a glare before glancing at his phone. Aizawa Shoyuta. When and where would you like to meet? Shoyuta tapped his foot impatiently on the tile below him, his arms crossed with a heavy glare towards the door. Sho. Hizashi pressed his hands onto his shoulders, forcing the man to sit down on the couch in the room. He practically shook in anger. Neither of them wanted to leave Izuku alone if they didn't have to. Plus, with the rage bubbling to the surface, it would be a miracle if Shoyuta managed to not hurt someone. Luckily, the hospital had private rooms where people could make phone calls or where hospitalized heroes and police officers could talk about classified information without risk of it getting leaked. You're not one to get like this. Have you gotten that attached? Tsukachi spoke up with a smug smirk on his face, sighed, glancing him. The underground hero groaned, throwing his head back. Not that joke again. He ran his hands down his face. Hizashi giggled with a fist to his mouth. We're never going to let you live it down. Be glad Namuri doesn't know about the little inside joke. He grinned, full-on laughing now. The blonde was cut off to a knock to the door, which he quickly reached out and opened it with his long arms. He went quiet as they were greeted with a family of 3. The woman quickly moved into the room, her hand clutching at a boy Izuku's age that looked like a clone. I'm Bakuga Mitsuki. She bowed in greeting. This brat is Katsuki and that's Masaru. She bobbed her head in the man's direction. Katsuki glowered at them when the 3 of them introduced themselves. They all sat back down with Tsukachi placing a device on the table. I hope you don't mind, but I will be recording our conversation if you allow me. Mitsuki nodded. I understand. My quirk allows me to detect lies, so I will be listening in on the conversation and often asking the questions myself. He then listed off the names of everyone in the room, the date and time for the recording. How did you know Izuku? Me and his mother, Inko, were friends since high school. She even introduced me to Masaru. We were the bridesmaids to each other's weddings. Since we were close, our children were often playmates. Mitsuki answered, a sad look in her eyes, her hand tightening around her son's. The boy yanked his from hers with a scowl. Shoyuta took a deep breath. Were you aware of how she treated her son? The blonde did her best to suppress her anger, but they all noticed how she clenched her fists. Masaru spoke up softly, none of us were aware until just recently. When Izuku's quirk didn't come in, his father left them and Inko was devastated. We never saw them much. After that. How'd you find out? When we got the news of Izuku being hurt, the situation was explained and things kind of clicked in place. We should have realized sooner. He bowed his head. Shoyuta hid behind his capture weapon, he could get along with him. Katsuki gasped. Auntie didn't do anything to the demon nerd, she. Mitsuki shut him up by placing a hand on his spiky head of hair and forcing it down. He growled like a feral animal, clawing at her hand. Luckily it didn't seem to hurt him, just annoy. Mitsuki gave him a stern glare. I thought we raised you differently, but I guess not. She turned to the three, a guilty look on her face. Tsukachi's quirk picked it up as true. He leaned forward, his gaze on Katsuki. What made you go off on him? Katsuki glared at them. The teacher called Deku by a. Hisashi held his hand in front of him. Don't call him Deku. He's not useless. A different name, some ugly swamp name. Shoyuta twitched at that, tightening his crossed arms. When I told the demon nerd to explain, he ran like the coward he is. Izuku thinking he was better than me. I don't know how he did it, but I couldn't get to him the whole day. What about the next day? Hisashi asked, sending a concerned glance towards his boyfriend. He discreetly bumped their arms together. Me and those extras cornered him. He kept saying Auntie was just like me. That she didn't care about him. Always calling him names and beating the shit outta. He trailed off as his mother stood up and lunged for the door. It slid shut with a loud thud. Katsuki flinched, closing his mouth with a frown. Masaru seemed to be debating whether or not to follow her, sitting on the edge of his seat. He pressed his lips in a thin line, gazing towards the door. Shoyuta sighed, knowing how conflicted he was. Hisashi understood as well, sending the brunette a comforting grin and standing up. I can go check on her if you'd like? The man relaxed slightly, hesitantly nodding. Mitsuki was hardly like that, not even when her hormones were out of whack when she were PRGNT. So, it easily struck a chord in him. Masaru easily trusted the hero, a thankful look in his eyes when the blonde left the room. It was just the four of them left. Katsuki, Midoriya came to me herself and confessed that she hurt Izuku. Tsukachi leveled with him. I can detect lies, there were no lies. The small blonde furrowed his eyebrows, a small frown evident on his face. So, Antidote really did that? He mumbled angrily. Shoyuta nodded. Why were you hurting him before that? He asked softly. Katsuki almost didn't hear it. The nerd didn't keep his promise. We were supposed to be the greatest heroes ever, but Izuku can't do that if he's quirkless. He promised. Masaru took his son by the bicep, holding him back from lashing out. That's not his fault. Masaru told him. You can't choose. Of course you can. You and the old hag have stupid quirks, but I wanted an awesome quirk and I got one. His hands popped dangerously and Shoyuta was quick to flash his own. Katsuki jolted with wide eyes as he looked down at his hands, since in the shape of a claw. The black-haired maid immediately understood Izuku's earlier motion of mimicking them. What the hell did you do? He growled at Shoyuta, attempting to activate his suppressed quirk. Public quirk use is illegal without a license, kid. Then why the F you using yours, hobo? Katsuki glared. Masaru gasped. Katsuki! I'm a hero, I have a license. I'll even show it to you if you think otherwise. Right now, you're being a spoiled rotten little kid who thinks he's better than everyone. The blonde clenched his fists. 'Cause I am. Shoyuta shook his head. No, you're not. With that attitude, you're not going to be a hero. The same goes with how you're currently using your quirk. A hero would blow up the villain, not the victim who did nothing wrong. He stood up abruptly. Izuku's in there partially deaf and blind, crying over the fact that he doesn't even have a foo friend. He pointed towards the door, his anger boiling. Tsukachi was quick to grab him by the forearm. Deaf and blind? Katsuki breathed out, terrified. Masaru seemed in a similar boat, growing pale. Oh, you suddenly care now? Sho Yuta bit out, and was going to say more, but the tug on his arm halted him. The detective shook his head, so Sho Yuta forced himself to relax. Am I really that bad? Katsuki looked at the floor, on the verge of tears. Before Masaru could say anything, the underground hero crouched down in front of the boy. Sho Yuta sighed, his anger fading. No. Most of the blame falls on your teachers, peers and parents. Quirks are a touchy subject in society. Weak and villainous quirks have enough discrimination, but no quirk? I doubt anyone ever stepped in and told you it was wrong. You're just a kid, the adults should have done something, and when they didn't, you thought it was right. Katsuki frowned, but that doesn't mean it's not your fault either. The kids around you, did they have friends? He nodded wordlessly for once. Did they treat them the way you did Izuku? He thought for a moment. Tsukachi fondly smiled. No one's getting out of this unscathed, but let me ask you this. Do you want to make this right? Hizashi sat on the floor next to the woman, bringing his knees to his chest and crossing his arms over them. He stayed silent, waiting for her to make the first move. I'm a horrible mother, aren't I? She sniffled, wiping at her stray tears. No, you're not. He softly reassured her. I've seen my fair share of horrible mothers. You're not like them. Mitsuki bit out a harsh laugh. Katsuki got my temper and bad mouth, but I thought that was just how he was because that's how I am. Neither me or Masaru thought it'd be this bad. The blonde playfully scoffed. All kids have something to hide. Me nor Sho noticed what Izuku was going through, and we're pros. We knew something was off, but not this level. You and him? The hobo-looking man. She paused. Soulmates, he answered, then brought a finger to his lips. He doesn't like people to know. Hizashi winked. Mitsuki laughed loudly, but it quickly died out. How do I fix this? You. He questioned, then nudged her lightly. What about us, all of us? This isn't just a you problem. He pursed his lips, looking at her out of the corner of his eye. I guess you're right. He dramatically nodded with a serious look on his face. Well, do you have anything in mind? The blonde hummed, wiping the last few tears from her face. We signed up for family therapy and gave Katsuki anger management. He's grounded for several months. Hizashi thought about it. What about an apology letter? We'll all look over it before he gets it, but it could help with getting those feelings out and actually having a chance to think about what to say. That sounds like a good idea. She agreed. He won't like that we'll read over them. Maybe get his therapist to read through it. That would certainly help with his progress, and it'd be confidentially between him and whoever he talks to. I'd be fine with that. A light bulb then went off above his head. If things go well enough, they could see each other again. I'm sure Izuku would be happy to have his friend back. Seems like a good effendi plan. Mitsuki stood up, her face practically beaming. Well, she was back. If that's how she normally was. Izuku was carried to the car by his papa with brand new hearing aids in his ears. The sounds around him were no longer faint and warbled, but everything was still so hazy, blurred colors mixing together. He hated it and simply opted to press his face into the blonde's shoulder. Papa put him in a car seat, as if he were a child. He grumbled the entire time he was buckled in. Izuku even unbuckled it before the car door was shut. Izuku. Dad sent him a look from the front, judging by the way he turned around. Izuku huffed. I'm not a little kid. You're 6. Papa strapped him in again. Almost 7. He shot back as the man slid into the driver's side. In 2 months, little listener. Right now, you're still 6 and absolutely tiny. A smirk evident in his voice. Izuku was tempted to swear at him, but bit back his tongue. Dad seemed to agree, chuckling. Izuku glared as hard as he possibly could. It had no effect. He crossed his arms and kicked his legs. Looking out the window proved to be boring. It's not like he could see anything. It was all just a blurry wonderland of watercolors. So, He turned his attention to Marshmallow in her carrier. They had a staring contest. Izuku knew he won when white covered the spot where her blue eyes were meant to be. "Dad," he called out, getting a loud hum in response. "What about school?" Izuku asked, kicking his feet. "You're not going back, simple as that. They're going to burn in heat to ashes." The man corrected himself, but Izuku smirked, knowing exactly what he was going to. He held back a giggle. "So I'm going to another school?" "Of course not, little listener. We don't think it'd work out well." Papa pulled into the parking lot. Dad opened the car door to help him out, to find him already unbuckled and sitting on the edge of his seat. That's right, he wasn't helpless. He internally snickered. "Instead, you'll be going to UA with us where Recovery Girl can monitor your health as you fully recover." Izuku looked forward to that. Maybe he could talk with Nizu again. He missed his talks with the principal. Maybe he could even mess with the teachers. That was something both he and Nizu enjoyed doing often, like replacing the sugar with salt in the teacher's lounge. It was very funny to see several teachers immediately GG or do a spit take. Dad was the only one unaffected, not even caring that he had salt in his coffee. "What are you laughing at, problem child?" "Nothing." "Run, tough litter." "I'm back, Beaches." "No shit, Sherlock. I don't know whether I should be relieved or upset." "Boogeyman." "Not me." "Run, tough litter." "Admit it, you missed me." "Boogeyman." "Who would miss you?" "Run, tough litter." "Hey." "No shit, Sherlock. Where have you been?" "You've been gone for a while." "Run, tough litter." "Personal issues." "Boogeyman." "Let me guess. You can't tell us because it'd give away your identity." "No shit, Sherlock. If we knew, we could help you." "Run, tough litter." "Why would I need any DMN help?" "Boogeyman." "Your kid." "No shit, Sherlock. And a vigilante." "Run, tough litter." "Not a JID. Kid. I'm just short." "Go to hell." "Boogeyman." "Already am." "Run, tough litter." "No shit, Sherlock. Do we need to schedule another appointment with Hound Dog?" "Boogeyman." "Enough litter. Anyways, I won't be able to patrol for a while." "No shit, Sherlock. Are you okay?" "Boogeyman." "At least that gets rid of one problem child." Izuku gasped in fake offense as if the man could hear him, rolling over in his bed. "Run, tough litter." "Of course I'm okay. I'm not a kid, I can handle myself." "No shit, Sherlock." "Run, tough litter." "Don't me fucker." "Boogeyman." "Tell us if you do need help. We're always here." "Run, tough litter." "Eraser does care." "No shit, Sherlock. He's a hero. It's his job to care." "I also care, so promise us you'll tell us." The 6-year-old frowned, not knowing exactly what to say. He curled further into himself. Izuku knew they would help if he asked for it, no, even if he didn't. His chest tightened at the thought of the future. This wasn't about them helping him. It was about him helping them. Even if it meant suffering alone, or even dying. He'd do anything. "Boogeyman." "Ke?" Izuku was brought out of his thoughts by the vibration in his hands. He took a deep breath and searched for comfort from Shudo before he could spiral. The warmth flooded his system quickly and easily. "Run, tough litter." "I will." "Boogeyman." "Wasn't so hard, was it?" "Run, tough litter." "Hardest thing I've ever done." "No shit, Sherlock. I'm not even going to ask how you know my name. Or tell you not to call me that." "Boogeyman." "Wouldn't listen." "No shit, Sherlock. That's why I'm letting him get away with it." "Run, tough litter." "Could you do me a fave?" "Boogeyman." He's asking nicely. "Run, beach, run." "No shit, Sherlock." "Language." "There is a kid." "Boogeyman." As if that matters with how much he curses. "Look at your own name." "No shit, Sherlock. I didn't choose my name." "Run, tough litter." "Can I please get a waffle?" "No shit, Sherlock." "Boogeyman." "No shit, Sherlock. Mike would love you." "Boogeyman." "Don't you dare." "No shit, Sherlock has added Yamada Hizashi." "Yamada Hizashi." "What?" "Boogeyman." "You're dead to me." Run, tough litter has changed Yamada Hizashi's name to Banana Mike. Banana Mike. Love it. "Boogeyman." "Oh my god." "Run, tough litter." "What are you doing awake?" Present Mike is a daytime hero. Banana Mike. "I have a hard time sleeping at night without my kitten." "Boogeyman." "I'm not even Gorifbstuin Swinso." "Run, tough litter." "I'm sure Izuku wouldn't mind if you slept with him." No shit, Sherlock. How did you know about him? Run, tough litter. Police files. Not that hard. Banana Mike. What makes you say he wouldn't mind? Izuku immediately grimaced, realizing he could have just outed himself. He had been so into talking to them that he forgot his own persona and that he couldn't just say things like that. Run, tough litter. I know the little sheet better than you think. Who do you think told you to find him? No shit, Sherlock. Eraser? Are you a boogeyman? Can you call an ambulance? Banana Mike. What happened? Are you hurt? Boogeyman. I fell off the 3rd floor. Take a guess. No shit, Sherlock. How'd that happen? Boogeyman. Don't call me kitten, Zashi. Banana Mike. I'm sorry, show. No shit, Sherlock. Send me your location. Boogeyman. I'll be fine, I just rolled my ankle is all. I was being dramatic. See how it feels, Mike. No shit, Sherlock. Did you hit your head? Boogeyman. Maybe. Oh no. I just laid there for a moment on the cold concrete and let it sink it. Banana Mike. He's fine. He was just being lazy. Boogeyman. Okay. You still there? No shit, Sherlock. He's been quiet. Banana Mike. He's not offline. No shit, Sherlock. What was that favor you wanted from me? Boogeyman. Why don't you go to bed, Zashi? I'm not sure when I'll be home. Banana Mike. Alright. I'll try. Banana Mike is offline. Hizashi yawned, standing up from his position on the couch. He tiptoed down the hall, not exactly sure how loud he was being. Marsh followed closely behind him before splitting off when he passed Izuku's room. The white cat pawed at the door, which opened silently due to not being shut fully. She slid through the crack and the blonde paused. Hizashi remembered Black Cat's words, so he gently pushed it open further. Izuku was curled into a ball on his bed, a frown evident on his face with pinched eyebrows. The blonde shuffled forward. Izuku? He asked, wanted to break the boy out of his possible nightmare. No shit, Sherlock. Maybe he's doing something right now. Boogeyman. Makes sense. Pinned location. Now you can send that. Ambulance. But not for me. Add a cop car to that. Run, tough litter is offline. Hizashi tensely smiled as he read through the messages, exiting the app for Izuku and shutting it off. He would have never suspected Izuku of being a vigilante, especially one that acts like Black Cat. He sighed. Well, he admitted that he wasn't going out for a while, so it was a problem for later. He slid it under the little listener's pillow before slipping his arms underneath Izuku. The 6-year-old shifted closer to him, his features slowly relaxing. His fingers clutched at his shirt as if he were a lifeline. Izuku was a very light sleeper, so it was concerning when he didn't wake up the moment he touched him. So Hizashi pressed his cheek to his forehead, his hands being occupied. He was a bit warm to the touch, but not enough to warrant any worry. If Shoyuta came home an hour later to find the two wrapped around each other in his and Hizashi's room, he didn't mind. He even got in bed as softly as possible as to not wake either. They definitely didn't wake up in a mess of tangled limbs. Am I a mouse, a dog, or a bear? That doesn't matter, as I'm Principal Nizu. He chirped happily, greeting Izuku as he entered the infirmary. But I believe you already know that. Izuku looked towards the rat, smiling. Recovery girl ruffled his hair. You're free to go, Izuku. Nizu will take care of your schooling from now on. She gave the boy some gummy bears. He quickly shoved a few in his mouth. Nizu nodded, his paw patting Izuku's hand. Indeed I will. His beady eyes sparked with something unknown. The time traveler gulped, fearing the knowing gaze in his eyes. Would you like to hold my paw as we go to my office? He asked, holding out said appendage. He is quite large, and with how small I am in your sight, it would be very easy to get lost. Izuku hesitantly took his paw. He gasped, so soft. He whispered. Nizu chuckled at him, leading him down the hall. They were both almost the same height, so it wasn't an awkward reach at all. First things first, I'll be testing your current knowledge so I know where to begin with your learning. The rat sat him on the sofa before scurrying towards his desk. He gathered a large packet and placed it on a clipboard before handing it over to Izuku. If you're not able to read it, I can read it to you. He shook his head and got to work on doing the fairly thick packet. Just do what you can. The green-haired boy sped through the questions, not even having to really think or work most math problems out. His pencil was always on the paper, only pausing to turn the page. Izuku must be doing something right, judging by the principal's reaction. Nizu spun in his chair, kicking his short legs and cackling into a teacup. He paled. Principal Nizu. What is it? He asked, pausing in his spinning and placing down his teacup before scrambling over. The clipboard was taken from his hands as he quickly read over what he has done so far. I'm not done yet. Just as I expected from Deku. Nizu beamed. Izuku froze, his heart dropping. Deku? He whispered. How did he know that name? Did he come back with him? If so, did he know anything? Nizu was smart, he had to. The rat nodded, placing the clipboard on his desk. Yes, it's nice to see you again. Even if you are a child as of now. The 6-year-old smiled. Why you're from? Nizu nodded. I am indeed Deku. I have no clue as to how it happened, but I believe it is only the two of us. I've already tested all my staff on whether they would know the future or not. When you came into custody of my employees, which didn't happen the first time around, I figured you must have known. Izuku quickly stood up. So I'm not alone. What's the last thing you remember? The animal hummed, sadly not much. He sighed, but forced his usual smile back on his face. Then tilted his head towards Izuku. Everything was really loud, then a loud crash, and it all became muted. I remember that, but I did happen to see lightning before blacking out. What about you? The green-haired boy looked down, waking up. But looking back on what happened, it's like certain parts were cut out. Like dotted out when the TV screen goes to static in a storm and occasionally cuts back on. Nizu placed his paw on Izuku's hand, the bandaged hand. It was a comforting gesture, his soft fur brushing against the little skin it could touch. I have a theory. Although, I'm not completely sure. That's new. He nodded. Time travel is a fickle thing, it's not like we have our memories to rely on. And it would be too risky to try again just to find out. Come over here and we can figure this out together. Nizu pulled him along. Izuku rounded the desk, pulling himself up into the office chair Nizu sat in. They shared the large seat as they went through the pages of information he had written down. You think it has to do with One for All? The quirks of the past users are a mystery. He shot back, and that started a very serious and overwhelming discussion that lasted for hours. Nizu and Izuku have pored over the possibilities for hours, their minds moving at speeds so fast that they were no longer speaking Japanese. Japanese to English to Chinese to French. The two were a mess as their tiny forms scrambled over each other, shooting theories back and forth. Come in. Nizu chirped softly upon hearing a knock at the office door. It swung open, revealing both Hisashi and Shoyuta. He's already asleep? Shoyuta asked, seeing Izuku passed out against the rat on the large couch against the wall. Nizu laughed, pausing his work and shuffling the papers. He is very smart, so we may have gotten ahead on doing algebra. I can say he is tuckered out. Algebra? Hisashi whispered, terrified. Everyone else ignored him though. He passed out an hour ago, actually. He's been knocked out since. I had recovery girl come check on him since he seemed a bit warm, but she said he should be fine. Nizu stated, looking at the boy currently latched onto him. Shoyuta ran his fingers through Izuku's curls, gently shifting him into his arms. He was kind of warm last night, he may be catching a cold. Hisashi offered. Izuku was practically limp in the underground hero's arms, his head resting against his shoulder. The coal-eyed man hummed, wouldn't be surprising since he just came back from the hospital. He probably caught something from another patient. Recovery girl had said the same thing. Well, no worries about that ever happening again. Izuku's safe here with us. What about the investigation against the school? Oh, they're already being shut down. Nizu cackled, somehow producing a teacup as he paused to take a long sip. Both heroes shivered. Alright, thanks for watching Izuku. We should be on our way now. Hisashi was gone, leaving Shoyuta to drag his feet behind him. It was a delight. Shoyuta sighed, shaking his head as he left. He pressed a hand to Izuku's forehead, He was quite warm, as the principal said. He shared a look with Hisashi. I'll make soup tonight just in case he's not feeling well. The blonde offered. We should have the ingredients. Deku, the position? Southeast the study behind AC Unit Hotel. Create, action, co-in? Possibly, plan 72C work. Deck, Nizu Ening. WHI drop. Yura, swing rubble. Grow, 0, take, side a blast. Then back ev-1 else. No do. Shut down, IO active dash. 17% Dre dash. Yup heroes. Think, stop us. It doesn't, I'll save ons. 24% aimed. Foo. Happen dash. Nez dash, grab reactor. Got it. Not respawn. Hall, see them. Bleed a bits. 39% hit. Any should. Won't pen. I won't able up. Oh soft. 62% rained. Blem chill dash. Hear us. 98% Dre dash. 100% ind. DRA complete. Awa bit soft. A crier, still. Ugh, is stupid mono? NPC. You monologue all time. Any all backup Avil cornered. Deku. I need, get up. Prin.Sipal any? No ti, need onoset pause. II.Zant. Guis. Probable dash. Going. You, okay. Sure.Gara down. NK God. And nerd, cuff, happened? Please still me. No mu ad. Where? Track working. I'm so.ry. We'll let go right before we hit the water, okay? Izuku, it's okay. The voice snapped him out of his dream. Izuku woke suddenly, a groan spilling from his lips as he took a shaky breath. He attempted to blink the blurriness from his eyes, but it remained. Papa? He whispered, looking at the blur of yellow. The man's hand brushed the strands of hair from his face. He could just imagine him saying, I'm here, little listener. He slowly pushed himself up, groaning at how heavy his limbs felt, letting Papa help him put it his. Hearing aids. My head hurts. Izuku held back the tears. I can get some Tylenol. Do you think that'll help? Izuku hummed in response, so Papa stood up and left the room to grab the medicine. He took a deep breath, wiping at the tears before they could fall. The time traveler realized what he just dreamt of. A memory. His last one. He didn't see much, just darkness with the occasional glimpse of someone's face or an action. It was mostly sounds, voice he recognized as his own, Dad's, Nizu's, Shigaraki's, and his classmates. He even heard Hawk's at some point. Everything he heard was like static, constantly cutting out and grainy. He drank the medicine his Papa gave him with a disgusted look. The bitterness hit him and he couldn't hold it in. Izuku held his breath and buried his face in Papa's chest. Papa placed a hand on his back and head, pulling him into his lap and lightly rocking him. The green-eyed boy wrapped his arms around the man. Pretty rough nightmare, huh? Izuku sniffled, clinging to the blonde as he was carried to the living room. It was obviously difficult for the voice hero to create a bed on the floor with one arm, but Izuku couldn't bring himself to care. He had died. He had been so out of it from blood loss as Nizu talked to him slow and soft like a kid, even though he knew they were both about to die. He had held his hand as they fell. They had stayed silent as everyone shouted at them across the comms. What happened after he died? What about Shudo? Just how much pain was he in as he fought? As he died? You need to breath, Aizu. Papa pressed him closer. He could hear his heartbeat, faint but there. Izuku shuddered, taking in a long, shaky breath. Slowly, the boy copied his breathing. Yamada hummed, Do you want to talk about it or do you want a distraction? We can watch a movie or play a game, anything you want, little listener. Game. Of course. Izuku felt very weird wearing glasses, but it was worth seeing the world clear as a crystal once more. Well, out of one eye that is. The other was permanently blind, giving him problems with his depth perception. These issues were temporarily solved with Papa and Dad constantly carrying him. But right now, he didn't give them a chance to carry him, hopping out of the car on his own and rushing ahead of them. Izu! Papa called after him in surprise. The time traveler had someone to talk to right now. He was in business mode. Until he tripped halfway up the stairs. Dad didn't bother hiding his snort, lazily picking up the shocked 6-year-old. Izuku crossed his arms and grumbled. Stupid F stairs. He had to refrain from cursing. Where are you off to in a hurry? Papa grinned at him. Nizu, I gotta talk to the rat. It's important. He stretched out the last word, clawing at the man's leather jacket to emphasize the weight of said importance. The dark-haired man placed him back down agonizingly slow, his grip not faltering despite how Izuku squirmed and wiggled free. Went still and huffed. You're insufferable. Papa raised an eyebrow. Oh, that's a big word, little listener. The green-haired boy only took off running the moment his feet skimmed the ground. The two heroes followed closely behind him, Papa texting him as they jogged after Izuku. Izu-chan. Auntie Nem ambushed him when he turned the corner. Izuku squirmed in her grasp, his lips set in a displeased frown. Let me go. He mumbled, kicking his feet. Nope. You have to go the recovery girl before seeing Nizu. I heard my little baby was getting irregular fevers. She cooed, hoisting him onto her hip as if he were a child. He blinked, his interest piqued. No, I haven't. The 6-year-old furrowed his eyebrows. I haven't been feeling sick. You've been really tired recently. Don't look at me like that. You took 5 naps yesterday. And every time, your temperature rises. Dad ran a hand through his hair. Izuku pushed the hero's hand out of the way, feeling his own forehead. I'm not hot. Only when you're sleeping, and it got really bad last night. Papa pointed out, worry evident on his face. We just want to see recovery girl to make sure you're okay, all right? The future hero hummed, hesitantly nodding. If it weren't him, he'd also be concerned, so he could easily understand how he felt. Okay, that I'll see recovery girl. He sighed. Recovery girl sighed. Well, I see nothing wrong with him. Everything is normal, even his temperature. You said it only raises when he's asleep. The highest was 39.3 degrees Celsius, and that was last night. Hizashi told her, it went down after we was awake for a while and I gave him simple children's liquid Tylenol. He tilted his head, chuckling when Izuku made a disgusted look, sticking out his tongue. That is quite concerning for his age. However, there's not much I can do besides monitor him when he sleeps. Maybe a medical choker? RG suggested, sitting back down in her office chair. Izuku blinked, wondering what she meant by that. Medical choker? He asked, staring at her with a confused look. It'll monitor your vitals without the need of all the wires and machines. She dug through her drawers. It's actually often used on mutation types or certain quirks if it interferes with the usual machinery. RG held out a thick, white and red band with a clasp on the back. Oh, that's so cool. He beamed, leaning forward to get a closer look. The colors reminded him of Shuto. Yamada hummed, that would be a lot easier than having to hook him up like he's in the hospital. He messed with Izuku's hair, smiling when the green-haired boy sent him a look. It was clasped on easily. Immediately, recovery girl spun around to face her computer. See? It sends all the information to my computer. Izuku pressed his lips into a thin line, remembering the sound of his heartbeat fading. He watched the numbers go up. The old woman turned to him, matching the concerned glance his papa sent him. Are you all right, little listener? Is it too tight? Izuku shook his head, not tight, just uncomfortable. He was sure the feeling would disappear as he forgot about it throughout the day. Papa bent down, holding Izuku by the upper arms. Is it a trigger like the weighted blanket? He asked. Both had something in common. The blanket would feel heavy and suffocating to someone so tiny like Izuku. And the choker could be tight around his neck, as if he were suffocating. Has his mother ever choked him? Izuku's lower lip trembled before slowly nodding. He wanted it off. It was such a tiny thing, a simple heartbeat. So why did it feel like a big deal? Papa was quick to unclasp it, before bringing the boy closer and gently rubbing his back. It's okay. We'll figure something out. It can be worn as a bracelet as well. The medical hero ushered it away. It'd be much more comfortable and less visible. It's not as accurate though. It'll be something at least. Wanna try it? Papa asked him. It's okay if not. The time traveler sniffled, hesitantly nodding. He liked the colors and might be curious about why his temperature was rising. He held out his arm for Recovery Girl, who placed it gently, fiddling with it so it could get a pulse. It was definitely a lot more comfortable, and this time, Izuku made sure to look away from the computer. He wiped at the tears streaming down his face with his sleeve, taking a deep breath. Is that okay? He nodded silently, burying his face into Papa's chest. Hey, how about we go to Nizu's office now? The blonde perked up, a spring in his step as he left the infirmary. You had something very important to talk to him about, didn't you? He attempted to cheer him up. It didn't work. Izuku only tightened his grip and whimpered. Papa understood and went silent, lightly bouncing his charge. The green-eyed boy wouldn't admit it, but it was oddly comforting. He didn't realize they were at Nizu's office until he was gently placed back on his feet. Izuku clutched to Papa's pants like a shy, clingy toddler. Upon seeing the white-furred creature, remembering some spots stained with red, washing away in the sea water along with the ash. Breath, Izuku. Papa crouched down once more, placing his hand on the center of his back. The rat gave him a knowing look, his beady, little eyes sparking. The principal knew. Izuku trembled, taking a shaky step forward. Nizu hopped down from his chair with a nod and rounded the desk. Izuku took that as his cue. The 6-year-old rushed forward, barreling into the principal. Hizashi blinked, staring at his son as he wrapped his arms around his boss. I'll handle it from here, Mike. Nizu waved a paw at him, so the blonde slowly inched backwards. While Nizu was scary and didn't have a very good grasp on emotions, he had a soft spot for children. He could handle Izuku for now, especially if Izuku wanted to cling to the animal like that. Nizu hummed, not minding the fact that he was currently sitting on the floor with a crying child in his lap. He simply patted the boy's back, closing his eyes and let him cry into his neck. He didn't mind, even if it wet his fur and suit. It would be quite redundant to ask if you are okay, would it not? He asked softly. What about you? Are you okay? Izuku choked out. Of course the de-aged hero would be concerned for someone else's well-being before his own. The pro sighed, deciding not to point that out and simply answer the question. Why would I be? Watching someone die is not fun. Much less so when it's someone you know and you're powerless to stop it. My emotions are the most humane thing about me, Izuku. Even if I do not understand clearly most times. Izuku shivered, having gone silent for a moment. The only sound being his unstable breathing and occasional sob. I'm sorry. He whispered, almost inaudible, but his incredible hearing was able to pick up on it. About what? I failed. Izuku hummed. Well, if you failed then so did I. But we didn't, we accomplished our goal. At a cost, yes, but we did. He smoothed out his hair, holding back a grin at how soft it was. The boy lessened his hold but didn't move an inch. Like a frightened animal playing a game of statue, we. There was no need to finish, Nizu understood. Michim. So did Shigaraki. Izuku took in a sharp breath, tensing. I promised. I promised and Nana I would. Save him. He nodded against his shoulder. You didn't kill him. His own actions did. He could easily kill anyone he touched, but you still tried to take his hand. He had hurt your friends several times, but you never sought revenge. You reached into the deepest pits of the darkness in his heart and tried to shine a light. Shigaraki had a chance to be saved, but he didn't take it. Nizu explained gently. That doesn't matter. You're still so naive. He fondly shook his head, resting his snout in Izuku's bushy hair. Think of it this way. A little girl is all by herself and lost. You approach her and ask if she needs help. She says her quirk can help her get home, but you still want to help. So you take her hand and lead the way. While your intentions are good, it's considered kidnapping. Understand? Izuku. Hizashi all but slammed the door closer, skipping closer like a child. His boyfriend nudged the boy, gaining his attention. "There's a letter for you." He then waved the envelope in front of him. Izuku quickly recognized it as Bakugu's handwriting. The green-haired boy squirmed, hesitantly taking it. "You don't have to read it if you don't want. Someone already did. There's nothing bad." He frowned, thinking hard about it. Izuku wasn't sure he trusted Bakugu right now. The boy sighed before slowly tearing it open. His green eyes quickly glazed over his parents as he unfolded the white paper. "Dezukin, that was the name I called you for a while, and you called me Kakin. Even when I started calling you Deku, I was still Kakin. Deku's a shitty bad name, isn't it? You, and being hurt feels FNG shitty doesn't feel good. I hate it, so it makes sense that you'd hate it too. Those demon extras had nothing on you. They're so fuck annoying. They just want to be friends because I'm so cool. We're supposed to be the best hero duo ever. Not whoever Bakugu is. I guess you can still be a hero. I'll help you. Sorry. Kakin. P.S. There's something else in the envelope." It was short and simple, but so much like his Kakin. But right now, this was Bakugu. It'd take a while, but he was on the path to becoming Kakin again. Izuku stared at the bottom of the page, a small drawing there. Stick figure versions of themselves holding hands. It almost felt silly to look at. The green-haired time traveler then took the envelope and turned it upside down. He blinked. It was an origami crane. The object was slightly flattened to fit into the envelope without being suspicious. Izuku smiled, carefully taking it. The 6-year-old gently fixed it. He felt it in his hands, his face flushing with excitement. He quickly stood up and darted to his room with the objects in hand. Shoyuta and Hizashi shared a look. What was all that about? Hizashi pursed his lips. Shoyuta shrugged. Izuku closed his door, rushing towards his dresser and rummaging through the drawers. At the bottom of the last drawer was an old notebook, very old to him but somewhat new to his younger self. He and Bakugu had matching ones, writing them shortly before Bakugu's quirk came in. They may have been young, but both were smarter than most. Especially Izuku. It had been so long that his memory of the codes in the book were fuzzy. So he made sure to check it. Indeed, he was right. Izuku almost cackled to himself. He threw his arms in the air and fell backwards, kicking his feet. The boy then shot up, carefully placing the paper crane on his nightstand before rushing back out with his hearing aids in. "Do we have any origami paper?" he asked loudly, almost scaring his caretakers half to death. "Oh my God, Izuku!" Papa scolded him, but he simply stuck out his tongue at the blonde. Dad sighed, gesturing to the hall. In the office, second drawer to the right. "Wait, why do we have origami paper?" It felt like forever since Izuku had been out at night, so when Izuku slipped through the window, he felt free. He took a large gulp of fresh air, laughing lightly to himself. He was dressed as Black Cat, scrambling up the side of the apartment. He rushed over the rooftops, extremely careful of every move. His eyes glazed over the full colors, using the change in color as a map of when he needed to jump. It was harder than it looked, and he had fallen and tripped several times. He had his glasses on, so he had to be sure not be seen, especially by Eraserhead. Oh boy, that could possibly give it all away. So he ducked down low, making sure to not be seen by anyone despite the fact that very few people were out. Luckily, Bakugu's house wasn't far, so it didn't take long to finally hop over the fence and climb up to the blonde's window. He lightly knocked on the glass, a hand clutching at the sill. It took about half a minute before it slowly opened. Bakugu's red eyes stared at him in shock. "Izuku?" He gaped, no doubt recognizing his eyes behind the frames. "Yep, that's me," he whispered, grinning behind the mask. Izuku swiftly pulled it down, along with the hood. "Why the F are you dressed like that?" Bakugu yelled but started whispering halfway through, as if he was going to risk waking the old hag. Izuku shushed him, his whispering wasn't very quiet. "Just a hobby of mine, doesn't matter." He waved him off. "I got the message." "Of course you did, demon nerd. You made the effing code." Izuku giggled, nodding. The green-eyed boy sighed, shoving a hand in his pocket. "Well, I also came to drop off something. I thought it'd be a bit suspicious to send something this silly back." He pulled out a crumbled piece of paper and proceeded to throw it straight at the blonde's face before booking it. "You mother foo!" Izuku cackled to himself, glad at the chaos he had just caused. He then fell off the building and caught himself on the edge. So he shut up. He deserved that. The time traveler sighed, flopping back onto the roof. He sighed and threw his arms over his face. He really wished he could resume being Black Cat, but it would be very difficult with his current situation. Izuku had been out for a very little amount of time tonight, but it had felt so freeing. His phone buzzing caught his attention. Izuku pulled it out of his pocket and turned it on. He frowned at the notification. The vigilante had turned off his burner phone ever since he had last texted them, just so he wouldn't be compelled to be Black Cat. Izuku had turned it back on just in case he needed it. Banana Mike has started a private chat with Runtoflitter. Banana Mike. But you've got 10 minutes chapter text. Izuku didn't even bother going through his window after getting the confirmation that the door was unlocked. He knew he was in trouble as he rushed home. Dread pooled in his stomach. The vigilante shut the front door with a frown, toeing off his shoes. His gaze quickly met the voice hero's. The blonde grabbed him by the arms, Izuku yelping at the motion. He flinched as he was hoisted into the air, being held like the child he was in Hisashi's arms. Izuku huffed as he was quickly checked over for injuries. Hisashi sighed. He was gently placed down onto the couch. "You're 6. The blonde stated, crossing his arms. "Almost 7. That changes nothing. What matters is the fact that you're out there fighting people that what twice thrice your size. With no experience and no backup." Izuku frowned, sinking further into the couch. He avoided the hero's gaze. Hisashi sat down next to him. "I won't tell Sho about it, but I'm not letting you out there. If you want to continue what you're doing, you have to get a license. But that's so far away." He cried out, knowing there wasn't much he could do as a simple civilian. Yes, he had Nizu on his side, but it would be much easier and reassuring to do it himself. "It'll take forever." The blonde wrapped his arms around him, being the boy closer. Izuku's eyes watered. "At least wait until I know you can protect yourself, then. It's not cool for you to simply disappear in the middle of the night, you dig?" He slowly nodded against his chest. "It's scary enough thinking about Sho going off and possibly not being here when I wake up. So just be patient, okay?" Izuku didn't respond, just wrapped his arms around him. They stayed like that for a while until both of their phones buzzed. Hisashi shook it off. All right, go change and put your gear away before Sho gets back." He stated seriously. "Off you go." "No Sherlock. Okay, at Runtoflitter care to explain why you were out tonight?" "Boogeyman. He was out?" "Banana Mike. I thought the listener said he wasn't going to be patrolling for a while." "Boogeyman. It's only been a week." "Runtoflitter. About that?" "No Sherlock. I almost thought you were dead. You said you wouldn't be patrolling. But you also haven't been on at all." "Banana Mike. Screaming is my job." "Boogeyman. Your job is being a menace." "Runtoflitter. I just had a little errand to run." "Boogeyman. In the middle of the night?" "Runtoflitter. No Sherlock. Why were you in costume for an errand?" "Boogeyman. Uniform." "Runtoflitter. Uniform." "Banana Mike. There's 2 of them." "Boogeyman. Why are you yelling? I can practically hear your voice." "Banana Mike. It's my job to scream. I don't need a reason. Plus you 2 started it." "Runtoflitter. You're such a child." "Banana Mike," says the toddler. "Runtoflitter. I'm just short." "No Sherlock. Let's not start a fight." "Runtoflitter. Too late. Put your hands up." "Banana Mike." Radio. Ye aoea. Let's get this show on the road, listeners. "Boogeyman. Oh no. Boogeyman is offline. Come on, problem child." Izuku groaned, throwing an arm over his face in response to his dad shaking him. "Don't wanna." He slurred, digging his bed for the blanket to throw over himself. Shoyuta sighed. "I get it, you want to sleep, but we also have to get to school." Lightly pulling at his arm, Izuku huffed, rolling over to put his face into the bed. The green-haired boy let out a low, long groan which slowly trailed off. Shoyuta raised an amused eyebrow, crossing his arms. Zashi, come do your job. My job? He yelled down the hall. Being an alarm clock. You know, screaming? There was a loud gasp. You wound me, Sho. But glad to know I'm needed. Hizashi burst through the doorway, skipping towards the bed like a child. Little listener, it's time to rise and shine. He sang, wrapping his arms around Izuku's middle and lifting him up. Izuku yawned with a glare, letting himself hang in the man's grip. Shoyuta thought he looked a lot like a grumpy cat with the way he was draped over his arms. I wanna sleep, he whispered. Well, at least eat first. The voice hero took him to the dining table. Izuku was sat down and given a simple bowl of miso soup and rice. He was half asleep as he ate, eyes refusing to stay fully open. Izuku's face almost fell onto his plate several times. You feeling okay? He nodded as Shoyuta ran a hand through his hair, frown deepening at the fever coursing through him. Should I wet a rag? Hizashi asked, already getting up and going through the cabinet for a clean rag. He wrung it out and tied it around Izuku's head, ignoring any bouts of protest. Both adults let him sleep as they got ready to go to work. Izuku was left in his pajamas as the dark-haired male lifted him up from underneath the arms and hoisted him up onto his hip. Considering just how small Izuku was, it was easy. The green-haired boy was out cold with his cheek pressed against Shuta's shoulder. Do you think RG got enough data? I'm not sure, Sho. It's only been a couple days. Hizashi sighed, not bothering to turn on the radio to allow their son some peace. He's usually not this tired though. While he did go out as Black Cat last night, he wasn't up any more than an hour or so. There was no way it had that much of an effect. Well, it'd be nice to know what's going on. It only raises when he sleeps. Not sure I want him to sleep much longer in case it gets higher. He frowned, sparing a quick glance to the back seat. Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll wake him up when we get to you. Recovery girl frowned at the info on her screen, humming. Hizashi's heart dropped, shaking Izuku slightly to keep him awake. He jerked his head, blinking the tiredness from his eyes. What is it? Well, you can see here that throughout the day his energy levels are slowly going down. Much slower than normal. She pointed to the scale on the screen. Shoyuta shuffled closer. However, when he sleeps, his energy raises twice as fast as it should. It seems that the sudden influx of energy is causing his temperature to rise. The rate of it going up and down is so abnormal. Hizashi asked, Izuku's eyebrows furrowing in confusion. His hearing aids weren't in, not wanting to get them wet with the rag around his head. The old woman agreed. It sure is. It goes up just slightly when eating and staying the same when relaxed but raises at a concerning pace when asleep. Shoyuta sighed, leaning against the wall. Could you possibly find out why it's doing that? Recovery girl quickly nodded. I have a theory. Lay it on us. It's most likely the work of a quirk and I highly doubt it's the cause of a third party. She swiveled in her seat, looking at them with a serious gaze. Izuku yawned, slowly waking up as he was jolted every time he got sleepy. It wasn't a good idea to let his temperature raise very high considering how dangerous it was. Especially because he was so young. He hated the thought of not being able to sleep but agreed with the reason. He tugged on Hizashi's shirt. What's she talking about? The man gestured to RG, who started signing. What did the quirk doctor say when he claimed you were quirkless? I have 2 joints in my pinky toe. He said it was impossible to get one. Izuku was quirkless, had always been until All Might gave him one for all. Going back in time would change nothing about his body other than what he'd done to it. Having an extra joint in your pinky toe has nothing to do with being quirkless. It was disproven almost 20 years ago. Izuku was in shock after being told that there was a possibility he had a quirk. He had lived his whole previous life as quirkless, until he gained one for all, of course. So, when another bracelet was added to his wrist, this time to suppress whatever quirk was there, he didn't know what to do or say. He was carried to Nisa's office, wide, green eyes staring unblinkingly behind them over Papa's shoulders. Izuku found his emotions bubbling to the surface. He scrubbed at his watery eyes, causing his glasses to go askew. The time traveler bit his cries down, taking a deep breath as he was placed gently on his feet. He shook, not sure whether or not he wanted to run back to his parents or to crawl onto the couch and just wither away. Upon turning around, he noticed they were gone and Nizu simply staring at him. So, the green-haired boy opted for the last option. He just sauntered over to the maroon-colored couch and threw himself on top of it. His feet dangled and he couldn't breathe, but that was fine. So you have a quirk? Might. Izuku mumbled. The rodent hummed, shuffling through his stack of paperwork. I've been briefed on the situation. He gave a chipper giggle, and I believe you do. I didn't have a quirk the first time, before One for All. Why would I have one now? He huffed, moving himself to a more comfortable position. Izuku's back faced Nizu. Well, from what I know, your energy levels have been abnormal lately. So your possible quirk could have something to do with that. Either the energy itself is the quirk or a side effect. Nizu hummed, leaning back in his office chair. Although I do have theories. You always have theories. Of course I do. Theories are the foundation of gaining more information after all. He chuckled madly. Izuku groaned, knowing it was true. Are you sure you're not an all-knowing, powerful god disguised as a rat? Nizu beamed at that. I'm flattered you think that highly of me. He teased, looking in his direction with a dangerous glint in his eyes. Anyways, your energy levels are positively affected by your quirk. The 6-year-old listened carefully, not bothering to correct him on the fact that no one was 100% sure it was his quirk. You were claimed to be quirkless. Quirkless people would not be treated well, so let's start a pile. Pile of what? He turned his head, craning to see what shenanigans the principal was up to. Papers. The papers will represent your energy levels. So, let's take this one large stack. Nizu pushed a bunch of others aside, showcasing a single pile of them. This will be the amount of energy from before we were sent back in time. He pat the top. I don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. Izuku sat up, cautious. His green eyes watched his every move very carefully. The time traveler was very intrigued despite his confusion. Nizu shook his head, ignoring him. Let's list things that takes away energy. You were bullied, which includes running away. He took a single sheet and placed it in its own pile. Injuries caused by your peers and your mother. Nizu moved 2 sheets. Who also withheld food from you at home. Another paper. He shifted, beginning to understand his point. Some kids would steal my lunch or do something to ruin it. Nizu added more, a very impassive look on his face. It looked so out of place, used to seeing a smile of some kind. You had school work to do. It'd often get stolen or ruined. So I'd have to do it again or get more work as punishment. Some even had me do their work for them. He nodded slowly, shifting several more papers to the smaller stack. I also had to clean my desk a lot. You were always chasing hero fights. Nizu chuckled softly, probably hoping to lighten the mood, even if it were just for a second. Izuku sat straighter. I did put a lot of work into my analysis. Nizu wholeheartedly agreed. They are very high quality, even the older ones, and you had a lot of them in a short amount of time. I'm assuming everything got even worse in junior high? At the nod, he almost doubted the stack. Then I had training with Toshinori. Izuku grimaced. Nizu cackled, tossing a good amount of papers into the growing pile. Knowing you probably overdid yourself. It doesn't help that you weren't getting enough food. Izuku huffed, crossing his arms. I don't work myself that much. Nizu just tilted his head, giving his creepy stare. Like he knew more than he should, not surprising. You got into UA. UA is very strenuous. You kept getting injured, which also required RG's quirk, which saps even more energy. Then you kept getting move into villain attacks. Oh boy. The war and that time tour went a rogue. The green-eyed boy gasped in offense. I did not go rogue. Vigilante then. I had a provisional license. Provisional. Izuku glared, then quickly looked away. His intelligence may rival Nizu's, but that didn't mean he was any less scary. You had even more quirks to manage, less sleep. He continued to list everything off in a rapid pace that even Izuku had trouble following along. So he gave up and simply laid back down. Oh my god, I've run out of paper. It seems you have no energy to spare. Nizu gasped dramatically before quickly going serious once more. Now this time around, most of that hasn't happened, so we can just get rid of a huge chunk of this. Izuku blanched at the mess he just made, staring at the floor with wide eyes. Papers flew everywhere, but Nizu didn't seem to care. He was more intent on proving a point to his fellow time traveler. The principal gave him a warm smile with his beady eyes, gesturing with a paw. Now, all of this, he paused, is no longer happening. You're getting more food, no more bullies at school, no schoolwork in general, and no abusive mother. His voice faded at the end. Izuku's lip trembled, and he curled further into himself. Nizu tilted his head, hopping off his chair and slowly approaching the child. That energy is building itself back up, and since it's no longer being wasted so often, people have noticed. I think that's also the reason why you've been so tired lately. Your body hasn't been dealing well with the sudden change. The 6-year-old choked out a sob, wrapping his arms around Nizu as he crawled up onto the couch. He gently pat the boy's back. I believe it was always there, you were just a late bloomer. His birthday's coming soon, isn't it? Nizu asked without looking up, peering down at his paperwork with a displeased look. Shoyuta paused at the door, turning his head. Yet what about it? He was slightly unnerved at the tone in his boss's voice. It was that you can't stop me tone, meaning he was scheming something. Nizu grinned, finally looking up. He may not be related by blood, but I think it's about time he learned about your family. He clapped his paws together, staring the hero in the eye. The dark-haired male sighed. He didn't bother outright denying but did protest. Don't you think he's a bit young? Give him some time to process everything before shoving something else onto him. No, but I believe Izuku is more responsible than you let on. Nizu hummed, gesturing to the knocked-out cold Izuku. After the past few days of observation about his quirk, they had finally taken off the bracelet. That meant the vigilante was now passed out in order to regain that energy. You do it whether or not I say no, so I see no point in saying otherwise. Shoyuta grumbled, his grip tightening on Izuku and shifting his further up. His limp arms swung at the movement. The rat nodded. You know me so well. I'll be taking him on Sunday at noon. Sound good? Shoyuta hesitantly agreed. You're free to join us. The underground hero slammed his office for shut and Nizu flinched. His staff was very respectful, even Shoyuta. However, he guessed that was a sore spot for the man, so he didn't blame him. Nizu sighed, leaning back in his giant chair. He's been trying ever since he was a student. Well, I tried. But he sure is a Jizai, isn't he? The principal asked, looking to the corner of the room. I know. I say it every time. Izuku being Izuku, he was quick to figure out more about his quirk. He took Nizu's advice and wrote it as if the quirk belonged to someone else while keeping himself in account. His frantic mumbling seemed to scare his dad with how out of it he was. Since they were at home, both Izuku and Hisashi had their hearing aids out. So Shoyuta was the only one to hear what he was saying. My energy levels are affected by my quirk, gaining a small amount when I eat or drink something and raising extraordinarily fast when sleeping, but it doesn't seem to have a limit. I'm gaining more energy than I am wasting, so maybe I could use that leftover energy for something. Possibly to raise my stamina and go super fast? Ooh, or maybe I could use that energy in a way Inko used her quirk. She had harder times using it when tired and easier after just waking up or drinking a cup of coffee. It raises my temperature, so what if I was able to concentrate it in one place? It'd raise high enough to make sparks or flames. I've always had a higher tolerance to heat. Shoyuta had never looked so close to passing out. What's wrong? Hisashi asked. He pointed at the 6-year-old on the floor, who was scribbling in his newest notebook. He's mumbling. He signed back. How can he be this smart? What's he saying? Shoyuta was frozen for a moment or two, just staring unblinkingly at Izuku. The blonde lightly shook him. The underground pro leaned in, not looking away. He's too fast. But he is spewing theories left and right. Hisashi stood up, hell-bent on grabbing his hearing aids just so he could head Izuku. He really wanted to know what he was saying, so he snatched them from the nightstand and put them in. The voice hero wandered into the living room at the perfect time to hear, "Maybe I could," before the room quickly filled with mist. Hisashi was quick to hold his breath, having been around Nemuri too long to take the risk. The mist looked just like her quirk, except the color. As if he was going to breath it in and risk passing out. With Shoyuta being the closest to Izuku, he was quick to vault over the coffee table and snatch him, backing up into the hallway with Hisashi. The hero placed him on the floor, looking him over as his boyfriend fanned at the light blue mist. Shoyuta crouched down. "What W?" He fell sideways and passed out with a thud. Izuku gasped, immediately panicking. His first thought was embarrassingly childish. "Papa! Dad's dead." Hisashi turned towards them, panic in his eyes, dropping next to Shoyuta. He sagged in relief. "He's fine, just unconscious." The blonde looked at Izuku. "My phone should still be on the bed. Can you go get it?" Izuku nodded slowly, scrambling towards the door. Hisashi waved at the incoming mist, hoping it backed off. The green-eyed boy held out the phone to him. The voice hero input the password for him, growing sleeper. Izuku seemed to be in the same boat, swaying on his feet with tears in his eyes. It was most likely from using his quirk instead of being affected by it. Hopefully Nemuri could come by. She should be immune. Hisashi handed the phone to Izuku before he passed out, taking the Underground Pro's example and snoring. "Hey Zashi, what's up?" The woman's voice came through the phone. "Auntie Nem." Izuku cried out, vision fuzzy with tears. "Aw, sweetie. Where's your papa?" She always treated him like a kid. The boy wiped his face, trembling as he attempted to hold in his sobs. "On the floor, sleeping." She hummed in confusion, "What about Sho, hun?" He gave the same response, choking out a cry. "Hey, it's okay. It's gonna be okay, sweetie." "What happened?" Nemuri was quick to rush down the street, already close by in a cafe. "I wanted to figure out more about my quirk and then the apartment filled with mist. Dad and Papa passed out." He sniffled, sitting on the ground and crying. "Papa said to say call you." The R-rated hero immediately understood why. She was immune to most gases. Like sleeping gas, laughing gas and the such, so it made sense. The black-haired woman quickly dialed an ambulance just in case it was harmful and needed to get Hisashi and Shoyuta checked out. "Izuku too. Can you open the door for me, sweetie?" She asked over the phone, already climbing up the stairs. The door was open the moment she got there. Izuku cried out, dropping the phone as she picked him up. Nemuri held him tightly, picking up the discarded phone and slipping it into her pocket with hers. "It's okay. They'll be fine. I normally hate publishing when there isn't a chapter to publish, but I think you'd appreciate me telling you that I'm not dead or any of the sorts. I'm sorry it's been a while since I last updated, and I deeply apologize for saying it probably will be a while till I do update once more. No, I do not plan on abandoning this book or any of my books. Things have been very stressful lately, and I find it harder to not only find time to write but pull up ideas and the will to do so. I'm not sure how long I'll be gone, but once again, I will not abandon my works, and if I ever do it will be because of death or somehow a physical incapability to do so. Even if I have lost interest in the fandom. I just need some time to pull myself together and prepare for the cruel, cruel world. I hope you understand." Shoyuta was the first to wake up, opening his eyes to a paramedic and Izuku hovering over him. He groaned, eyebrows furrowing before slowly sitting up. Izuku beamed at him, tears in his eyes. "I did it." The paramedic nodded, reaching out and ruffling his hair. "You sure did, bud. How about you go help your papa over there?" The green-haired boy gasped, standing up and scrambling towards Hisashi. He crouched down, holding his hands over Hisashi. Shoyuta watched with a shocked look as the mist slowly leaked from his fingers. The Underground Pro ignored the medic. Nemuri turned her head towards him, smiling once she caught his gaze. "What happened while I was out?" he asked, letting the two of them help him up. "Izu called me from Zashi's phone." She shrugged her shoulders. That sure is one quirk of his. Nemuri sent a thumb towards the boy, who was hugging his blonde boyfriend. She followed him as he moved towards Hizashi's. So, Dad! Izuku collided with his leg. I'm sorry. Hey, little listener. What did I just say about that? Hizashi crossed his arms, waving of the paramedic next to him. Izuku pouted, jutting out his bottom lip. Not my fault. He mumbled, yelping when he was snatched and moved into the air by said hero. He giggled. Tell him what you found out, sweetie. Nemuri told him, pinching at his cheek like the menace she was. Izuku batted her hand away. He gasped, stars filling his eyes. Izuku was mesmerized by his own quirk, which they found adorable. I was able to move the mist and pull it back in. I felt even more energized after I did, so I thought that maybe it stole your energy and that's why you were so tired. I was also tired because I didn't have it, so when I took it back, I took the energy it took from you. Then when they came, he gestured to the two paramedics watching them, seemingly deeming them not an emergency now that they were awake. I asked if I could try something and they let me, saying it shouldn't be dangerous, and I gave it back to you. Isn't that so cool? He laughed, throwing his arms into the air at the last part. Neither of them knew what to say, so Nemuri filled in the silence with an equally enthusiastic, wow. As adorable as this is, we should really get you checked on. One of the paramedics politely interrupted, we're not sure of any effects it could possibly have. Hizashi passed Izuku on to Nemuri. It's quite a pretty quirk. Dr. Ishii awed at the little wisps of blue floating around Izuku's hands. The boy nodded, turning his hands and wiggling his fingers. He had managed to recreate what he'd done earlier, but on a much, much smaller scale. The man hummed, looking down at his papers and results of the other few tests they be done. He nodded, coming to a conclusion. This mist of yours is made of your own energy, so your conclusion was completely right. Dr. Ishii laughed. You sure are a smart kid. Hizashi didn't bother trying to hide the proud look on his face, tugging at his boyfriend with a large smile, who had his usual look of indifference on. Izuku nodded at him, completely serious as he moved the mist around, which took a lot of concentration to do. Now I just need to figure out what to use it for. I mean that I could use it like anti-nem and shoot out so much that it seeks their own energy and knocks them out. But then I'd be super tired and I do need to be able to fight in case someone's immune or has a gas mask. Dr. Ishii blinked, thrown off by witnessing Izuku's rant firsthand. Would it be possible to make it dense enough to act like a smokescreen? The mist slightly expanded, moving in on itself. However, Dr. Ishii reached forward before it could potentially escalate and clasped his hands around Izuku's. Now, I admire your eagerness, but we don't want to repeat today's earlier incident. He lightly scolded, to which Izuku pouted but agreed. Dr. Ishii pulled away. It does seem to emit a light, so it could be an odd mix of his birth parents. Shoyuda admitted, which was a weak form of telekinesis and fire breath. Yes, that does make sense. The specialist agreed, there are some other He trailed off as he looked at Izuku. The man gave a surprised hum at the small object in the 6-year-old's hands. Shoyuda and Hizashi looked down at him. Shoyuda blinked, leaning in closer while the blonde gasped with his eyebrows raised. In his hands was a blue sphere, slightly flattened and squished in some places. Now that's interesting. Dr. Ishii stood up, taking it from his hands after getting permission. He turned the imperfect sphere, just big enough to hold in the palm of his hand. It had a slight glow to it. Do you think you could do it again? The black-haired vigilante eagerly nodded, forcing Shoyuda to hold his head down. Calm down. The hero told him. He was ignored as Izuku summoned more mist. This time he knew what to do and quickly began to shape it. Hizashi gasped, watching with wide eyes as it gathered in the air, forming a sloppy heart. Try and see if you can compress it. Dr. Ishii instructed. Slowly, its color deepened slightly, and then dropped as gravity took effect. Izuku quickly caught the shape. Emchim. He looked down at the sphere still in his hands. Just how durable is it? The quirk doctor wondered to himself, tapping on it. Dr. Ishii paused, then turned around and threw it at the wall behind him. It had a small crack, mist slowly leaking out of it. The time-traveling vigilante called it back to him. He turned towards Izuku, who had a matching beam on his face. It does seem to have some durability to it, despite feeling like glass. Dr. Ishii nodded to himself, narrowing his eyes as the grin on his face grew. Could you possibly adjust the durability? Maybe. Izuku gave it thought, turning his own shape around in his hands. It might have something to do with the density. The denser, the stronger, Dr. Ishii agreed. It's also made of my own energy, but it's outside of your body, meaning my system doesn't recognize the excess energy. You wouldn't be overloaded with said excess energy, and I can call it back to be reused, they said in tandem. Hizashi balked at the duo, slowly turning towards his boyfriend with a look of terror. Their gaze shared 3 words: they are crazy. A wisp can create moldable wisps of light from one's energy, which can be stockpiled from any living object, person, and even transferred. Uses energy and nutrients from the creator's body to manifest. Come on, please? No. Please. Izuku. What did I say about going out as Black Cat? Hizashi placed his hands on his hips, the stern look seeming so out of place on him. Izuku frowned. I'm bored, I need something to do. He whined. The vigilante was dressed in uniform and halfway out the window when the blonde somehow knew exactly what he was doing and dragged him back inside. I get that, but it's still dangerous. But they'll get suspicious if I just never come back. I said I wouldn't be patrolling for a while, not 10 years. The voice hero paused and blinked. Well, you're right. But that doesn't change my decision. Can't you just not fake your death or something? The green-haired boy gaped at that idea. I'm not doing that to Dad or now. And now? Since when did you see A? They'll feel so guilty. They think I'm a kid. You are a kid. So if I fake my death. Izuku trailed off, letting his papa fill in the rest. His shoulders dropped, a contemplative look on his face. Before he could say anything else, Izuku desperately pulled out several points. Think of letting me go as another birthday present. He raised an eyebrow. No. I've been doing it for a while and haven't gotten hurt a single time. Izuku. The blonde warned. But if you really don't want me to, I won't fight anyone and will get back up first. Bargaining won't work, mister. I've even commissioned a visor with prescription lenses with several other uses like heat vision, for example. So I can see. When did you get the time to do that? I'll be in Dad's patrol area. Hizashi went quiet, a contemplative look set across his features. I'm not sure. Izuku whined lowly and pulled out the last card up his sleeve that would hopefully change the tide. Nizu knows. He froze with a questioning hum. He knew before you. Everything. Why do you think we're both so close? That you know Nizu isn't completely right in the head, right? He slowly whispered, but still didn't seem to be willing to let Izuku go. You're scared of his laugh. The time traveler pointed out to set the tone, making Papa think about it. Hizashi shivered. I've got him wrapped around my finger. I'm sure he'd do anything to get back at you. He's always been fond of playing pranks and scaring everyone. Add me into the mix, and you'll have several heart attacks in a single class PRD from sheer anxiety on what we're bound to do with you. They were both silent for several moments as the pale blonde trembled in the spot. He then blinked and looked down at Izuku with pure horror. Text me every 5 minutes or call every 10. You are to be home at least an hour before show. You can only go out 3 times a week and only on days show is out patrolling. He pursed his lips, narrowing his eyes. That's your only option. It's either that, or I will not hesitate to tie you to the bed, mister. And tell Shoyuta. The boy nodded furiously and quickly turned around before the man could change his mind. He leaped out the window behind him, reveling in the shriek that followed. The boy rolled on the ground and sprang up with a newfound energy. Black Cat quickly rounded the corner to enter an alley. He had an idea. Placing a hand on the brick wall, he willed the mist to materialize. He could see the slightly glow from underneath his fingers and slowly peeled it away, cupping his hand as he did so. Eventually, he peeled it away. On the brick wall was a small, oddly shaped ledge. Black Cat pulled harshly on it. It didn't budge. The vigilante grinned and reached a bit higher, repaying the process. When he couldn't reach any further, the boy took a deep breath and hesitantly placed his foot on the lowest one. He grabbed at one with his hand and hoisted himself up. Miraculously, it held his weight. Which, admittedly, wasn't much, but it was an accomplishment. Slowly, Black Cat made progress in climbing the wall, summoning more ledges to hold on to. It was just like a rock wall at the playground. Except it was straight up and not curved. Either way, the experience was very similar, if not higher, and the fact that he was the one creating the rock wall. The 7-year-old couldn't help but laugh when he reached the top. It was an amazing experience. Black Cat's grin widened and he ran to the opposite edge of the building. He peered at the ground for a moment. He had an idea. The boy with the newly found quirk backed up and placed his hand on the ledge. From it sprouted mist, which steady climbed higher. Believing it to be sufficient height, Black Cat moved his hand to rest on the edge and solidified it. It suddenly gained weight and teetered towards him, but with a grunt, he pushed it to fall the other way. It hit the edge of the adjacent building with a loud thud. With a confidence he probably shouldn't have had, Black Cat hoisted himself up and ran across the conjured plank. Just for dramatic purposes, he jumped at the end and did a flip. Run, tough litter. Guess what beaches? Boogeyman. Oh no. Somewhere in the district, Tsukachi sighed and fell back in his chair. Run, tough litter. Yeah, that's right. You boy back. No shit, Sherlock. It's almost as if Mike's been rubbing off on you. Run, tough litter. I may have been listening to his radio lately. Definitely not cause I was being held hostage in my own home. Phew, Lindsay. Banana Mike. Put your hands up, radio. Boogeyman. Go be to bed. Banana Mike. You can't make me. Run, tough litter. WTF. Why does this always happen? Tsukachi Naomasa sighed, carefully watching the argument play out. There has been something on his mind for the past month while Black Cat was gone. The vigilante had asked him for a favor, nicely might he add. But he had never gotten around to actually ask. Banana Mike. Who's Lindsay? Run, tough litter. My wife. Boogeyman. But you're a kid. Run, tough litter. No, I am not. Just fucking short. Stop hating. No shit, Sherlock. Alright. Break it up, ladies. Banana Mike. I'm offended. Banana Mike is offline. No shit, Sherlock has started a private chat with Run, tough litter. No shit, Sherlock. Last time we talked, you said something about a favor chapter text. I need to get to Shudo. Izuku told Nizu as soon as entered the office. Recently his mark had been acting up, his training must have picked up. He resisted the urge to go barreling over, only the knowledge that the flaming trash can would set him ablaze. Without any issue made him rethink it. Ooh, how do you want to do it? Shall we be taking down Endeavor or simply kidnapping him? The rat hummed, immediately set to thinking. The green-clad boy shook his head. The abuse on his siblings isn't as bad, except for Tuya, but he's already run off, so we should get Shoyuta away from there. It should distract his father while we work on tearing him down. Nizu grinned. Yes. I know Endeavor occasionally brings out young Todoroki on patrol. What if we snatched him out from right underneath his nose? Like taking candy from a baby. Izuku shared the grin. But who would be willing to do that? While Dad would have the best shot as he could cancel his quirk, he'd still have a major advantage. Meanwhile, someone else would have to take Shudo away just in case. We'd need a whole team of people. The animal leaned back. Snipe and Mike would both be a good choice for a distraction, and Midnight's quirk can't exactly be countered except by a gas mask. Eraser could cancel his quirk so there's no explosion from the fire and gas. However, they would easily be found out and arrested. We need to be stealthy but be effective. It would be extremely difficult. There had been several cases against the number 2 hero and every single one was lost or dropped, very likely because of bribing. Izuku took a deep breath. What if I did it? As Black Cat? The principal paused, thinking. Alone? He nodded, Nizu's eyes narrowed and his feral grin widened. A moment of consideration later had the office filling with maniacal laughter. I like the way you're thinking. Shudo could not sleep that night as he lay in bed. The 7-year-old, nearly 8, stared helplessly at the ceiling. His training had suddenly gotten much more difficult, and his body was racking in pain. He trembled, fearing turning over in case he aggravated his injuries. He instead focused on the cooling feeling from his mark. It had been doing that all day long, but it wasn't unpleasant. It was almost as if his soulmate was happy, not upset. A small smile graced his face. There was a gentle breeze blowing across his face, spreading across his body and cooling off any burns he had. For some reason, he felt hope. Like everything was going to be okay. Rugi was not expecting visitors. So when there was a knock on her apartment door, the old woman nearly dropped her cup of tea in surprise. Shoyuta, Mike and Izuku would no doubt be at school at this time, and she hadn't ordered anything. She slowly stood up and opened the door to be met with the newest addition of the family and rat? Izuku. Oh, it feels like forever since I've last seen you. And this is? Nizu. That's right. It's me, Nizu, the one who could be a dog or a mouse or a bear, but more importantly, I'm the principal of Yui. The animal laughed. Izuku and I are on very important business, if you're willing to talk. He attempted to give his least frightening smile. It didn't seem to work. Rugi chuckled, hopped across the street and a couple buildings down, joining Nizu by an AC unit. Black Cat could feel the heat radiating off the number 2 hero, even from several stories off the ground. Shudo trailed behind his father with a solemn look on his face, wearily glancing at everyone around him. How sick that they all crowded the 8-year-old while Endeavor showed him off like a trophy. It'd be nice to have a stink bomb. The boy noted, causing Nizu to cackle. While that would be fun, I'm afraid my nose is sensitive. The principal shook his head. Black Cat shrugged but agreed, and his fire would just cause it to explode. Sadly, a smoke bomb will just have to do. Suddenly, the ground shook and the vigilante grasped at the ledge, eagerly awaiting his chance. Civilians began to scramble, screaming as a chunk of the road was hurled towards the hero. Nizu! He gasped as the rubble hit the side of the building they occupied. You didn't tell me his quirk was earth manipulation. Nizu's paw pushed him forwards. No time. Go get your soulmate. Without a moment's pause, he threw a handle full of smoke bombs. They exploded in a flurry of black clouds. He then jumped down, nearly rolling his ankle in the process. A roar of anger filled the air, causing chills to go up his spine. Black Cat squeaked as a body flew over his head and he rushed forward for cover, just barely managing to dodge Endeavor. He needed to get to Shudo. He's gone into an alley to your left. Nizu's voice chirped in his ear. He simply hummed, running in his soulmate's direction. His mark flared in fear, pulsing spontaneously. Shudo! He half-whispered down the alley, holding his ground as it shook. Small pebbles of rubble fell off the building next to him, feeling like hail on his back. The time traveler jumped up to dodge the wave of ice, slipping as he landed. Hey! It's okay. He raised his hands. Back off. The dual-haired boy shivered at the dead end, glaring fearfully but defiant. Shudo, don't you want to get away? He asked, desperately pushing aside the urge to look behind him in case Endeavor came after him. The boy was silent, obviously thinking about it. Hurry up, Cat, you don't have much time. The police are right down the road and Endeavor's winning. Nizu told him. Please. He whispered, taking a step closer and sending a reassuring pulse of energy through his mark. Shudo relaxed slightly, but the hesitation was still there. The vigilante slipped off one of his gloves, revealing the mark on the back of his hand. He gasped, glancing down at his own hand for a moment. There, on both of their hands, in the same spot was a pansy growing through a pile of snow, a blue glow radiating behind it. Izuku! The voice warned, but he ignored it in turn of sending a pleading look towards his soulmate once more, his eyes shining through his visor. Footsteps thundered closer and suddenly there was a smoldering heat behind him. The time-traveling vigilante stumbled forward and tackled the youngest Todoroki just as a rope wrapped around them, yanking them into the air. The telltale roar of Endeavor pierced their ears just as they collided with the roof. Come on, we have to go. Nizu pulled them away, scrambling with his little legs. The three of them wouldn't last a minute against the number 2 hero, not be fast enough to get away in time. Luckily, Nizu, being the evil genius he was, pushed the boys off the edge, right into a dumpster just as a blast of fire rocketed over their heads. Nizu's nose scrunched up at the smell and Izuku gagged, but he'd much rather be stinky than burnt to a crisp. Unfortunately, the getaway wasn't over and he ushered the two out. "We're going down there?" Shudo asked, peering down into the sewers. "Do you want to go back?" "No," came the immediate answer. Nizu lightly but urgently pushed him. "Then get in." Izuku groaned, following his soulmate with a disgusted look. The top clattered quietly above them and they were suddenly bathed in darkness. Endeavor's rage went on, just as police sirens were approaching. Nizu clicked on a flashlight, beckoning the 8-year-old boys to follow him. Luckily, there was a little walkway so they weren't walking in the nasty water. "It's a long walk, but it's best to safe." Shudo stared at Izuku with wide eyes in the darkness, shuffling closer as they began following the principal. Izuku smiled. "You're okay now." "What about my brother and sister?" he asked, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "We're working on it. It may take a while, but you are our top priority, young Todoroki," Nizu told him, taking a right turn. The boy sniffled, scrubbing at his nose. Izuku held his hand as they walked, letting the presence of his mark comfort him. Shoto stared at the green-haired boy, wrapped up in a blanket Nizu insisted on giving him. He blinked, looking back down at his hand then Izuku's. It seemed he still hasn't fully grasped the situation. "You're my soulmate?" He leaned closer and whispered it like it was a secret. "Yes." Izuku confirmed for the 5th time within the hour. The dual-colored boy just nodded, falling silent before speaking up once more. "What now?" Izuku paused from his spot on the floor where he'd been drawing as a way to pass the time. I think you'll stay with Granddada." He stammered. "Nizu?" "He'll stay here with me at UA for a few days until the initial news has died down. Then he'll be staying with Rugi until we figure out something more permanent. The story will be that she's watching her great-grandson while his parents are on an anniversary vacation." He nodded. Of course he thought it out well. "Think you can handle that, Shudo?" The time traveler turned to his soulmate. Shudo nodded with a small smile, sipping at the tea he'd been given and kicked his feet. Being around his soulmate surely did wonders. "We'll just need to hide his identity and I can get Recovery Girl to provide a checkup, but then I'll have to tell her." The rat began rambling to himself and typing away on his computer. "Don't mind him." The vigilante leaned back and pat Shudo's leg. The boy just sent the principal a weirded-out look but seemed fine. Izuku heard a buzz, coming from the bag which his vigilante uniform was in. He frowned as he dug through it, pulling out the burner phone. He clicked it on and viewed the message he got. The time-traveling vigilante paled and did a second take. Shudo leaned over his shoulder from where he was on the couch and Izuku on the floor. "What is it?" he gasped, feeling the spark of fear through their mark. "No Sherlock. At Runtofflitter." "But, you tackle, rascal." "Banana Mike." "What going on?" "No Sherlock. H kidnapped the son of the Bumber Teo hero." "Banana Mike." "Well, I can't read with all the typos." "No Sherlock. He kidnapped Endeavor's son. He's officially been labeled a villain, Mike. At Runtofflitter." "Get on here." "Runtofflitter." "Boogeyman." "Banana Mike." "What?" "Runtofflitter." "I can explain." "No Sherlock. W is there to explain." "Boogeyman." Izuku whined and dropped the phone in his lap, burying his face in his hands. Shudo just pat his head, unsure of what exactly to do other than comfort. "It's even worse 'cause Papa knows." Nizu hummed in agreement. "Just tell them you did it for a good cause and that you dropped him off here. Then when Mike and Eraser come to get you I can tell them the story. All fake so don't worry. You're a godsend, Nizu." "Why thank you." Izuku sighed and looked at his soulmate. "You can't tell them I saved you. Just go along with whatever story Nizu comes up with." "Of course." He nodded diligently, glad to help Izuku out. "Runtofflitter. It was necessary." "Banana Mike." "Necessary? For what?" "Boogeyman. I knew you would be the end of me." "Runtofflitter. Don't worry, Todoroki's all safe and dandy. Just fine." Very happy in fact. No shit Sherlock. Not that I don't trust you. But how can I? Run tough litter. The package has been delivered to a certain rat. All's fine. Banana Mike. You are so dead. Boogeyman. In UA? Banana Mike. I'm coming up there. Banana Mike. Is offline. Boogeyman. You have classes. No shit Sherlock. I'm just gonna leave this to you. Boogeyman. What no? No shit Sherlock. I'm not getting involved when Nizu's a part of it. No shit Sherlock is offline. Run tough litter. Good luck. Izuku tossed the burner back in the bag just in time for the office door to slam open. He flinched and immediately winced as he saw the angry look on his papa's face. I.Zu.Ku. He stammered. Shudo shifted further off the couch, clutching the cushion and half-shielding Izuku. He did not know this man, and came to the conclusion that he did not like the blonde for multiple reasons. Who are you? He glared. Shudo. He's my papa. The boy's glare gained more heat. It had given him an even bigger reason to hate him. Hisashi ignored the 8-year-old instead, positioning his hands on his hips and prepared himself for the lecture he was about to give. What the F dash, Izuku? I told you exclusively to stay out of extreme danger and stick to nights when show is out, and you go do this. I had Nizu with me. Izuku avoided his gaze, his glasses slipping further down his nose. So what if you weren't alone? Nizu's a support hero, not one who can go hand to hand with the number 2 hero. No offense, boss. None taken. But perhaps you should calm down. Nizu sipped at his tea. The blonde jerked as if offended. Calm down? Calm down? Izuku just. You're being very mean. Shudo spoke up, bent forward with his arms around his soulmate's neck and watching Hisashi with puffed-up cheeks. The voice hero paused, his brain suddenly catching up with what he read earlier. He gasped, and you kidnapped his son. Present Mike. Nizu decided it was time to save the 2 kids from the scolding. It was necessary. Young Todoroki here was in a horrible place and the only way to save him was to simply take him. Take him? Aye. The hero suddenly sighed, defeated as he fell into the nearest chair. His siblings still need saving, but they aren't nearly in the same amount of danger as him. Believe me, Mike, it really was necessary. There is no other way. The rodent leaned forward, a serious tone in his usually upbeat voice. The blonde nodded slowly, finally coming down from the rush. I see. What's the plan from here? Nizu smiled. Well, he'll stay here at UA with me for a few days. Then Rugi will take him in for the meantime, we'll go from there. He paused, mouth agape. Wait, you brought Granny into this? She agreed. Rugi knows exactly what she's getting into.